Good evening, model railroaders, and welcome back to the Second Section podcast, where it's regular guys talking about model railroading. I'm your host, Andy Dorsch, and joining me tonight is my co-host, Mike Ostertag. Mike, how are you doing?
Fan-flippin-tastic. I've been waiting for a while for this one.
Yeah.
This is going to be good. Everybody better buckle up because this is going to be a fun one.
This is going to be a really awesome show. It is Freelance Week here on the Second Section podcast. And tonight we have a panel of freelance model railroaders here to talk with us about some things they're going to introduce themselves, their model railroad. And then Mike and I have put up a grueling gauntlet of prying questions about freelance model railroading that these guys are going to have to answer. And then we're also going to be taking questions from the section crew out there tonight. And Humanity Junction Heath will just take one right now. He says, yep, next week, are we going to discuss which is better, Digitrax or NCE? You know what?
No, we don't bloodshed on the podcast.
We don't talk about religion on the podcast.
Hashtag not
we don't
sponsored.
we don't talk about religion on the podcast.
There you go. And then the last topic that we do want to talk about tonight is we are going to be giving away a Home Shops Tangent PS2 4750 covered hopper here, HO scale. We're going to be giving that away tonight in celebration of Freelance Week here on the Second Section, and it's for Michigan Interstate. That's a Jim Dandy of a car all the way.
This Discovery Channel's got nothing on us with Shark Week. This is going to be
right.
Shark Week.
This is going to make Shark Week look like a fishbowl.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like a bunch of guppies.
So tonight on the podcast, of course, we have Mike, and we're going to go around the horn this evening. Our panelists will introduce themselves. We have Chris Schicker. Is that right?
SS.
SS.
Hi, everybody.
So, Chris, how are you doing this evening? Excited?
I am
for the
doing
podcast?
outstanding.
Excellent. And what scale do you model in?
HO.
HO, okay. And then do you have a freelance or proto freelance layout?
I have a proto freelance at Illinois Midland.
Yeah.
And the layout is based in Decatur, Illinois.
Okay. And then how long have you been modeling for?
1976, my birthday. I got my first HO Tyco train set.
Okay. Wow. So you've been doing this for a few years.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go right over to our other Chris on the panel this evening, Chris Bell. How are you doing? Why don't you introduce yourself to the section crew?
Hi, so I'm Chris Bell. I'm an N-scaler from Eastern Iowa. And what all did we talk about? I'm sorry, I was kind of...
No, that's all right. So so you're an N-scaler. What do you have a layout currently, or a freelance layout?
So technically, I've got bench work. So I have the PFE, the Plywood Forever.
Plywood Forever. That's a good one. That's a good one.
Right. I only say that because I've got... Oh, where'd she go? You can't really see it, but PFE Alco that led to my freelancing.
Okay. Yeah, good.
So yeah, and listening to you guys, I've come up with some different ideas on terms. But so yeah, I've been around since 91 in N-scale. So been an N-tracker, and so yeah, it's a work in progress right now. Just built the bench work and tore down. I had a 30 by 60 layout that I was running as my freelance.
That's a monster.
30 inches by 60 inches. In scale. In scale.
That's a monster. But no,
Yeah,
very
we're
good.
metric here. This is metric meters, No.
That's
But
good.
I'm good. Yeah, I didn't know what I was signing up for when I said yes to Andy. I gotta admit. So
that's good though. I mean, that's kick the tires or actually kick the wheels, and we'll see how it goes this evening. So welcome, Chris.
thank you.
Yeah, and then we have Clark Kooning. Clark,
I'm here.
how are you?
I'm
this
great.
evening?
Thank you very much, and I appreciate your invitation.
Yeah. So Clark, for those who don't know who you are here in the second section, why don't you just kind of give a brief introduction of who you are, what scale you model in, and then if you have a layout currently, what is it?
Yeah, I thank you. I'm a rubber gauger. I have everything from Z scale to ON3.
Oh my gosh.
I have to say I'm a big narrow gauge fan.
Yeah.
Which okay. But Chris, I probably have 60 N scale DCC units and probably about 600 cars. So I'm quite happy to come on run with you. I have lots of T-track modules because they're like waste potato chips. You can't just build one. And
Amen to that. Amen.
I had a big N scale layout when I was younger. I probably really got serious when I was about 12, but I've had a vinyl set since I've been 5. And I had a big SN3 layouts that unfortunately had to be torn down because of a divorce, and then went through a little bit of a change in my life, and then I was luckily enough to retire and moved way up north in northern Ontario. I live on top of Lake Huron, and all the guys here in this little community are HO guys, so I said, okay, I'll start some HO stuff.
There you go. Drink the Kool-Aid.
Yeah. So I have a layout that's roughly in HO, 13 by about 30, with a section in the hallway. And later on, I can show some little bit of pictures and stuff. So,
yeah, outstanding. Very good, Clark. Welcome to the show. Clark's being very modest, by the way. I believe you're a master model railroader as well, if I'm not mistaken.
I am. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm an old guy in MMR terms. My number is like 225. So
yeah. So big NMRA guy and master model railroader. So look forward to catching your insights this evening. That's for sure.
Well, thank you.
And then last but certainly not least, we have Matt Forkham here with us. Matt, how you doing?
Doing good. How you guys doing?
Good. So same song and dance here for the section crew out there this evening. Why don't you introduce yourself and what are you doing out there in the world of model railroading?
Well, my name is Matt Forkham. I've been modeling. I'm 43 now, and I've been doing it since I was probably in junior high. Nice. I've had 4 or 5 layouts over the years. I'm currently working on what I hope to be my last layout.
It's never your last layout.
Well, those are the famous last words of your.
Yeah, you're too young to have you're too young to have a last layout yet.
I just got done with the wiring on this one, and I'm at that point where I never want to solder another piece of wire to another piece of track ever again. So my layout is a 14 by 20 foot freelance mono by road.
That's awesome.
And this is the second or third iteration of this layout, depending on how you count it. So,
okay,
yeah, great to be here.
Yeah, and I was rude to SS earlier here, and you Chris Schicker, you have a Facebook presence as well, don't you, for your model railroad? Correct? Did I lose your sound there, Chris?
I was on mute.
Yep, that's all right. Hey, that's good.
Now, see, we're starting to come back to where we're supposed to be.
Sorted, now we're
everything got all sorted out. Now we're starting to kind of.
Somebody's got to be first.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris, for doing that. I mean, I was really starting to sweat it here. This is.
I'll fall on the sword.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah. So we got the Illinois Midland here. Let's see. This is your Facebook group. Ooh, promo for the podcast. That's good. Yeah, is this a group or a page?
It's a private group. So I keep the spam out.
Keep the spammers out. There you go. But yeah, you do a nice job displaying your modeling and some of the stuff that's going on here with what you're doing. Ooh, had to put the proto throttle down after a couple minutes. Some coverage here of the RPM, it looks like.
Yeah. I did buy 3 squealers. So when I was there from Iowa Engineering, but I had to put the proto throttle down.
Yeah, looks like, we have Matt here as well on camera. So good stuff.
Yeah, Matt and I met at the RPM meet. He's been on my page for a bit now, and then we know Isaac.
Isaac Fabers.
Yeah, Isaac. Yeah. Isaac actually designed my layout.
Really?
And Matt, did he design yours too?
No, I ended up doing that. I didn't meet him till recently, so
yeah. Well,
mine was already done before that.
I mean, I've had an online presence with him, but that's the first face-to-face meeting we had was at St. Louis last week.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So,
So make sure to ask Chris for admission if you want to check out his modeling exploits. And Matt,
answer the questions. There's 3 easy questions. Just answer those, and it's a lot easier to get in.
Yeah, then he doesn't have to stalk you online. That's no fun, right? And Matt, you're out there in the world of social media as well with your model railroad, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
Yes, I have a Facebook page as well. It is public, so spammers come on in. I don't care.
At your own peril, right?
I also have a YouTube channel.
Yes, you do.
And an Instagram account as well.
Hey, just remember all those spam hits add to the algorithm. So
that's right.
Go.
I want likes,
awesome
hits,
t-shirts,
whatever I can get.
Yeah.
Speaking of the squealer, you had a great video on that demonstrating, the installation and functionality of it. That's really cool.
Yeah.
That was
Thank
nice.
you.
And then
those guys from Iowa Scale Engineering are going to have a hard time topping that. They're gonna their next thing is going to be pretty. It's going to have to be pretty ridiculous. I think that squealer's pretty cool. I picked up 3 of them myself.
Yeah. It's gonna. Once you put the tie grown in and everything like that, it's going to be really awesome.
Yeah. Hashtag not sponsored.
Hashtag not sponsored.
Yeah. Yeah. So Matt, you have a pretty awesome YouTube channel, and then you're out on the gram, as the young kids call it. Is that right?
I don't know. I don't know if they call it that or not. I am on Instagram. That's for me. I think it's quick and easy for me to take a picture of a recent purchase or something I'm frustrated over and throw it up on Instagram. So you can find me out there as well.
Outstanding. Yeah, good. And like, again, I've been following Matt's YouTube channel now for a few years, and it's very high quality produced videos, very informative and entertaining too. I'll never forget when you hammered those hot wings, and that was one of my favorite episodes that you had up. So, but yeah, so welcome to the podcast. Looking forward to your takes on freelance modeling as well, and we'll kick it over to the section crew tonight. We have a few people in here. Looks like we're up to almost 120. So welcome everybody in the section crew following us along this evening. Couple news and notes for y'all. Keep it civil and PC. We don't want to be fighting here in the chat. We do have moderators out there. They're the folks with the little blue wrenches next to their names. I've given them the full authority to give you the stanky boot and export you out of the chat. So follow the rules, have some fun, and ask some questions for our expert panel this evening. So Otter Creek and Rio Grande says only 52 likes. If you guys want to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the channel already. really helps us out. So tonight,
if you're
go ahead,
watching,
Mike.
hit the like button. It should
Yeah,
be
watch and hit
120
that.
likes.
120 likes. That's right.
It should be 120.
119. There's one troll.
One troll.
Oh.
There's always one. There's always one.
There's always
right?
one.
Yeah.
All right, good stuff. Good stuff. Okay. So again, let's go ahead and start off with the layout introductions. So Chris or SS, you
just call me Chris.
Chris. Okay. I don't know how to do this. I'm awkward. I'm just really awkward. You've put together a lovely little video for us this evening.
Yeah, it's my first attempt.
So. It was pretty good. So we're gonna play that, and then there's gonna be a whole slew of questions to follow.
Okay,
I'm sure. And so we'll cue up the Greasy Meat Hands band here. This is a little out of their element, but should be good. So let's take a look at the video Chris has put together on his freelance model railroad. That was very interesting, to say the least, Chris.
First of all, my first question is I didn't know the Greasy Meat Hands band were classically trained.
Yes.
So
just G major. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
So we spare no expense here at the Second Section podcast when it comes with production quality and the quality of our musicians that we have on staff. Yeah, it was good, but there's a lot.
I have so many questions.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot to unpack there. So, okay, so let's start with the name of the railroad. For those who are just joined the show, we're up to 130 now, by the way. So, why don't you take us through that, and let's talk about the scale, the size, and then we'll get into some of the pictures and the map of where your layout's located.
Okay, well, I started that concept in high school in the 80s. I was, I think it was the only thing I did to rebel was like where I grew up in Western New York. Everybody did New York Central, Pennsylvania, Appalachians, or Santa Fe, and I'm like, yeah, okay, let's be different. And then going through MR, and I had in 1982.
Hold on. Let me get you up there on the big screen. Yeah. There you go.
1982. I saw this at the public library.
Raise it up just a bit. There we go.
And I saw this for the first time.
Yeah.
The V&O, Alan McClellan's Virginia and Ohio. And I'm like reading this article as a 14-year-old, and I'm like, that's cool. It looked real. And then I think at that time, MR Model Railroader was doing a lot more Midwest in their coverage. And they did the Model Railroad Club in Chicago and Batavia. They were the Midwest Model Railroad Club.
Okay.
And I saw that, and, everything was only, this wide,
Oh, sure.
And, I'm like, that's easy. That's not a lot of scenery. You could probably put something up really quick instead of doing huge mountains. And I developed, the Illinois Midland, and I just got the Atlas, the Railroad Atlas from 1948. And I just started looking at railroad lines, and, there's a lot of Illinois Central lines in the middle of the state that eventually were getting sold off and abandoned. I got a couple IC books for Christmas, and it just took off from there. And then I saw the thing about Decatur, and in Decatur in the early 90s, Illinois Central moved 600 freight cars a day.
Oh.
And their yard is only 6 tracks wide, their main yard. at Grand Avenue, and it was just like, wow, six tracks wide. That's not big, and like they used end-to-end switchers, and it just like it just snowballed. It was something different, and I actually never visited Decatur until 1996. In my late 20s, and I just but I just did it from books and what I could see in the magazines, and like the Chicago and Illinois Midland. I remember reading in Railfin and Railroad in the late 80s that the utility in Chicago sold the railroad to a company called Illinois Midland Industries. And I'm like, looks like my company just bought a railroad. And I just incorporated that into my railroad. And then with the Chicago, Missouri and Western, that failure, I took part of that into my group. I took over the nickel plate from Ramsey, Illinois, west to St. Louis, and I had the connection. I got the SP as trackage rights, to get some more money on the line, and that's the railroad. So I stopped in 1995 because I'm not a big fan of graffiti, and the SP UP merger kind of derails my railroad, and then also the Canadian National buying Illinois Central, kind of in '99, that kind of puts a monkey wrench in my railroad. So I stop in '95.
So you stop in 95. Let me ask you this again. I'm sorry to discuss religion here on the show, but are you ditch lights or beacons? Do you prefer?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm that transition. I'm that transition.
So these guys before we let them on.
What's that?
Why haven't we screened these guys before
we did. We
on?
Had a pre-show meeting. They all checked out.
He never brought that up.
That was never asked.
That was never brought up.
Was never asked.
So it sounds like so the backstory is very key for a freelance railroad, right?
Yes.
So yours is essentially this, I guess, amoeba in central Illinois starting to grab different defunct railroads as time goes on, if I'm not mistaken.
And on the Facebook page, the railroad was started by former Illinois Terminal and Illinois Central management that was let go because of the downsizing, and Norfolk and Western bought the IT. So they want to create a railroad, and they're like, they bought the former IC lines, mostly south of Bloomington, north of Decatur. Those are the first ones to go up for sale because they wanted to provide the elevators with service, and they just saw the opportunity, and they just, they bought used equipment. I mean, all my equipment's used. None of it's brand new.
So is your layout, or is the railroad based on, it must be based on a prototypical map, so to speak.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So
it's all real railroads at one time in the last 100 years or so.
Okay. So what, with your railroad being what it is, what in today's railroad, what doesn't exist because of the Illinois Midland?
What doesn't exist? Let's see.
Like you said, you have the Wabash line going into from what is it, Decatur to St. Louis? Is that what you were saying? Or
no. I use a little NS for trackage rights to Springfield to get to the Chicago and Illinois Midland. But I use the Illinois Central charter line all the way down to Ramsey, Illinois, which is where I made a connection to the former nickel plate Cloverleaf, that NS gate that's sold to us, so we could get to St. Louis, and to keep money on the line. SP never bought the line from Chicago to St. Louis. They run on my railroad to get to St. Louis.
So we've got a couple of questions here. So we're gonna, Heath, we see you with the definition of freelance model railroading. We're gonna get to that in a second. Tom Holly's got a really cool question here for you, Chris. Any old ICG GP10s for power?
Well, I have a former ICG that was former Illinois Midland that was sold to Decatur Junction. Now, the Decatur Junction in real life runs from Assumption, Illinois into Decatur because it services a co-op in Assumption. Well, they also used to run from northeast out of Decatur to Whitehurst, that line in there. So that's the only portion they still use under my railroad. So I gave them one of my former Jeep 10s. It's red, it's orange and white. It's going to be ghost lettered, painted over, but their logo or my logo. Yeah, it's going to be. And then I want to give them an Elko too. So I haven't decided what Elko to give them yet.
Yeah.
So, but yeah. So that they're going to have a little run in once in a while. My problem with my layout is I just don't have room for staging, unfortunately. So I'm kind of limited in like what trains I can bring in and out, but during an operating session.
What's the footprint?
It's down here in South Carolina. My layout is actually in the second floor because we don't have basements here. They'd be full of water if we did. So it's on the second floor, and they call it the loft. It's like a free space. You come up the stairs, you turn a corner, and there's this big open space, and that is where the layout is, and it's like 14 by 15 ish.
Okay, so that's not bad at all. So I think what we're going to do, I see the show is going to flow in a certain direction this evening. So we're going to go through and describe each other's layouts, but I think I want the panel to take questions from the audience here while we go and do our layout updates, because there's way too many awesome questions coming in, and I don't want to ignore those. So first things first here, I think Heath from Humanity Junction had a very good question that I want the panel to take a crack at. And we can all have the different answer, and we can all have the wrong answer or the right answer. It's okay. What is the definition of freelance model railroading? So, you know what?
Let's kick that off with the MMR.
I was just gonna say that. Let's
have Clark. Let's have Clark
take a stab at it.
Yeah, let's have Clark do that. He's been around for a day or so.
If you're on mute, Clark, make sure you.
Yeah, I was like, thank you very much. Actually, I kind of wrote some stuff years ago, and it's in my presentation. Do you want me to maybe do that now?
Let's hold off on the presentation just a second.
Because there's a whole thing in there about
what? Yeah,
exactly that question. So
yeah,
I'm going to turn it around a little bit, if I may. There was a really good question about what's the difference between freelance and proto-lance, and I thought that was kind of a neat twist. And I now that I think of that, I think I'm more of a proto-lance guy.
Ooh,
but that was a neat thought, and yeah.
So there is no real wrong answer to the definition, right? I mean, it's all objective in what the modeler is actually trying to what's the word I'm looking for?
Create.
What the modeler is trying to create, replicate.
Well, I think to a degree all of us are proto freelancers, because it's almost impossible to model all but the shortest railroads. And I think if you look at it that way, we're all kind of in that proto freelance group. And I kind of think, and in my presentation, I'm kind of cheating on it. I'm looking at it now. I think there's three different categories. One is a layout that draws heavily from one or more prototypes to give the impression or convey the impression of a railroad. And it may not necessarily copy all the details of a specific layout. The other one is maybe models one or more specific railroads and using the what if scenario. What happens if so-and-so was bought, or, and it became that? And what happens if the powers to be had done things differently than they had done?
What if the Milwaukee Road never left the Pacific Extension and stayed a class 1 all the way to the West Coast.
Right.
That's a real thing. Guys model that, you know.
And then there is the fictional railroad that follows in form and function of a design and operates to a type of railroad in that era or region, of which the layout is set in. So, you know, it doesn't. That's the neat thing about model railroading and the imagination of the hobbyist. Did I pass?
I think.
Well,
I think you
hit the nail on the head with that first statement. Is the fact that we're all part of kind of a proto freelance type of thing, because we all want our power to be perfect. We all want the boxcars to be perfect, but then we will sure as heck skimp on what we do with the layout in order to compress what we need to in order to get. You know, selective compression is the biggest is the hobby's biggest enemy, but it is also a necessary evil. You know what I'm saying? So it's just, you're right. You know, in that respect, that makes even the most vehement prototype modeler is still freelancing to a degree because of selective compression and things of that nature. You know, it's, you know, unless you're modeling, you know, like you said, a railroad that's 2 miles long. I mean, even that's about 120 feet. You would need 120 feet worth of run to get 2 full scale HO scale miles in. Isn't it something like 60 feet? So I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with that. I don't know what everybody else thinks, but
I had a hard time justifying having my railroad switch to Decatur, because the IC is making money, 600 cars a day in and out of that yard. They're making money. It's like, how do I justify my railroad doing that? And, back in 89, 90, the IC, they cut the double main line going from Chicago down to Memphis down to one track. Moyer, the President Moyer did that. So my thing was, who worked for Moyer? Hunter Harrison.
Yeah.
So Hunter came up with an idea of, let's save some money in Decatur by doing the contract switching. So that's how I got my Decatur, my Illinois Midland, to do the switching in Decatur. The IC is still there. They bring the trains in, but
Chris, you just don't know it that Canadian Railways are taking over the world one railroad at a time.
It is right.
That's why I stop at 99.
I'm going to.
And they're doing that politely.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
I'm
going to address what Randy Timmerman said there. I want to jump on what Randy Timmerman said there.
Okay.
I'll tell Luke himself. Luke knows how I feel about his layout. I'll tell Luke himself. And if you actually stop and look at Luke Lemon's layout, his 2-second sub, it's a gorgeous layout. The basic premise behind it, he has the basics are all there in form and function. It looks just like it does on the real prototype. However, he still has things that he had to severely compress, like between the north end of Winnebago, or the North Winnebago and Oshkosh, or South Winnebago and Oshkosh. That's only a 5 or 6 foot or 8 foot section, and he's got 3 miles compressed into 8 feet.
Yeah.
So that's where we're coming from. He's got all the aspects there, but it's all smushed into one spot. And even he'll tell you, well, I had to kind of fudge a little bit here. I had to do this a little bit. I had to get this in here, but so I had to flip this around. It actually should be on the other side, but and he doesn't have very many places that are like that, but there are, so.
I like what your Naked Force said. He says, Thomas the Tank Engine, except it's based in Chicago and the locomotives run in gangs.
Yeah, right.
Oh man. So I guess
it started off fine, Andy.
Yeah, it's all right. It was good. So to bring it back though, and I think there was a neat follow-up that Heath's pretty much just moderating the show for us at this point. But he talks here, what's the follow-on question? He says, if freelance is based on a prototype, then what's the difference between freelance and protolance, right? So one of the things that we kind of talk about with our freelance railroads is we have some sort of anchor back to a real railroad of some point. So I see Chris Bell and Matt, you guys are kind of shaking your heads. Do you guys, what is your take on that in terms of, I guess, the definition of freelance, and then, having that anchor back to the prototype some way, somehow?
Yeah, sure. I was always drawn to freelance because of sort of the creativity, the artistic freedom that you have, not feeling like you were anchored to specifically what somebody else had decided, 15, 20 years ago,
Right.
how things were going to run or whatever. And so that's what always made me really interested in freelance. If I'm being honest, though, another reason why I've always been really into freelance has been because I don't know a lot about a certain prototype, especially back in the day before the internet. Finding information about anything was really kind of difficult, especially if you're, younger guy like I was. You can't just pick up and go down, spend a weekend down beside a track somewhere in South Carolina or wherever,
I can.
Rail fanning your favorite. maybe Chris can, but I can't.
I can't go to Decatur. That's 800 miles away.
Yeah. And so, but now as I get older, and I did pick for my freelance model railroad, I did pick a prototype to kind of base everything off of. And as I researched the prototype for my freelance efforts, I find more and more that prototype kind of seeping in because I'm falling more and more in love with how they solved a lot of the problems on the prototype, and I'm wanting to solve those problems on my freelance efforts. So what started as just a big freelance venture for me has slowly become more and more prototypical as I've refined, my idea of a freelance railroad over the years. And this is like the second or third iteration of my freelance railroad, and with every iteration it's getting more and more prototypical as I go.
Matt, do you think that stems from your track plan, or your in the essence of trying to get to the operation? Because I think a lot of people, when they start, they want the spaghetti bowl principle, and then they realize, hey, that's not, why am I making these moves? And you kind of, not only when you're doing operations, but then you think, well, a railroad isn't going to make all these moves because they don't want to be paying for people,
right?
Like Mike to sit and eat bonbons and or Tom Hawley.
Yeah.
So and so does that iteration or that idea of your change, does that come from your track plan or your operations, or kind of combination to make it more? It's still freelance, but it's got to become prototypical.
Yeah, I think as I've gotten more room over the years, I started, with a 4 by 8 foot sheet, and then I went even smaller to an N scale layout on a door, and then I got a little bit bigger with a switching layout in a basement. Now I've got a whole room that I can dedicate. As I get more and more space, there's a greater opportunity for me to model what it was actually like. There's just more space to put in the track that you need in order to make that happen and to do it in a realistic manner. And so with that space availability comes the desire to go, okay, well, now that I can kind of do this, what should I do? How much of the real railroad can I bring into my basement and still satisfy my needs from an artist standpoint?
Well, with doing that, how much? Okay, let's see here. Which way do I want to go? Okay, so by doing that over the course of time, have you continually added more stuff, or has negative space started to venture into it so that you have the same areas, you've just lengthened the run between them to give more of a prototypical feel? Because you know, it's the old adage, you know, you don't want your caboose in one town and your engines in another, right?
Yeah.
You know, that, and so it in the, you know, length of run has always been one phrase used. Negative space is another phrase that's sometimes used to describe that. So are you finding more freelance opportunities through the prototype to create that negative space so that your freelance railroad becomes more prototypical?
Yeah. For me, I definitely am a less is more kind of person when it comes to track work and that kind of thing. So I'm not a spaghetti bowl kind of guy. So definitely being able to spread things out, a longer run between towns. The last version of this railroad was basically just one town, and then staging was the rest of the world. And I didn't really understand necessarily what was going on in the rest of the world. I knew there were trains out there somewhere that would bring cars, and then they would end up in my staging, and then I would just bring them around and switch my little town that I had. But now that I have a lot more space, quite a bit more space, all I've really done was add one more town. I've just taken that staging and essentially I've just added scenery to the staging, you know, and then it stretched it out and given myself a little bit of run between staging, between what that was and to, you know, the old version of this little town I had, which I've just expanded out a little bit more just to give myself a little more space so that I can model things a little more realistically. So, and the fun was just figuring out what's happened over there in that area that used to be just, you know, the ethereal plane of staging. What's really going on there, and finding that out and learning about that. You know, I'm growing as a modeler. I'm growing as somebody who's getting more and more into operations and getting more prototypical as I go.
So Chris, Bell,
Well, yeah. So
you're up. Let's hear how what do you think about what do you got for an answer for this?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, I mean, talk about rabbit holes. So, you know, am I modeling the UP on some fictitious XYZ branch, or, you know, so what is freelance, or is it more fictional? And I was looking back at something I wrote back in 1997. It was proto-fictional. So proto-freelance wasn't even a thing. So that was the term back then. Freelance it's you know, we're all freelancers in like Clark was saying, in some degree. I mean, you've got to freelance some element of it. So I think it's that concept of, to me, freelance is making the whole thing, you know, like what Matt did. He's got a whole railroad from scratch, you know, and then the next step up is what Chris did with the Illinois Midland, something real, but incorporating that fictional into it. So, yeah, it's a tricky kind of question to answer. I think Clark did a good job with it. And I mean, what more can you say than that?
And see, I come from a different perspective because I have the unique, I have the luxury, I guess I should say, of being able to go from the inside looking out. And Luke Lemons and I talk about this all the time. And it's just one of those things where you know, you have the inside looking out aspect, but yet that can only, okay, because of what I do for a living, I'm able to see things typically most modelers aren't able to see on a day-to-day basis and a regular basis. I can see things, I see the why long before somebody that is driving past in their car and has never worked for a railroad ever will see why something is done. I see that from the minute I walk into the room or into the building. I know what's going on and I know why it's happening. So a good example is like in Manitowoc, we have 100 storage cars sitting there. They're in the yard. They're storage cars. I get asked all the time, why are the storage cars? Why are the box cars there? What's going on? Something must be happening in Manitowoc. No, they're just being stored. That's why they're just there. They're
Mike, are those company cars?
No, they're just, I don't know where they came from. I have absolutely no idea. They're
not Canadian National. They're just
they're our
anybody's
box.
cars?
They're all F box cars, and they're single door F boxes. And what we were told is there's 100 of them coming. Put them somewhere. Okay, that's what we did, and come to find out, it's because of some paper mill that is some paper mill someplace somewhere in the country, or had an issue, and these are their lease cars, and they're sitting there allegedly until the lease runs out. They could be there for 3 more weeks. They could be there for another 8 years. We don't know how long they're going to be there. All we were told is that you have 100 of them. Once you get to 100, we're not going to give you any more, and that's going to be the end of it, right?
Well, and so many short lines, they advertise we've got room for X amount of cars. I mean, your short line of the show, you've mentioned that a couple times. So
yeah. Some of those railroads have more cars than their actual trackage can handle. If they were all to be sent back to them at one time, their railroads wouldn't be able to handle all the freight cars, which is an interesting part about this whole conversation, because of the fact that that's something we don't think about, right? We always think about, and that on my Farland terminal, that's something I've come up with a backstory for that with my freight cars, and I'll explain that when I go through and do my presentation and stuff. But it's one of those situations where, looking at freelancing things like storage. If you're modeling a railroad in today's society, that's an industry. That storing cars in the middle of absolute nowhere is an industry. That's a lot of railroads make money. I believe the Escanaba and Lake Superior up north of Green Bay here, they make $3 a day per car. If you stop and think about it, you have 1,000 cars on your railroad. That's a lot of money coming in. And when you've only got a handful of industries, that's that could be a good way to maintain revenue and keep the wheels turning.
Well, that's back in the 80s, the per diem box cars, and LaSalle and Bureau County.
Mike, it's interesting you were saying about that, because Tom Hawley and I were talking earlier, and he was saying, and then when if they need a specific car to come out, there's a big fee to get that pulled out.
Oh, because it could take 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know when the ELS goes and moves cars, they do them, and I believe in there's certain blocks that they'll have. They make them when they want to move, they move them in blocks. But if they want a specific set, they've only got so much mainline space, and it might take them 2 days. They might have to shut down their railroad in order to dig out these 10 cars for a customer, and then they got to put everything back. And it's just a fact of life. It's just a reality of the way the whole situation is set up. But nobody models that, because
we do.
Well, we do.
We have tons of models up in our closets that we haven't pulled out yet.
Right? Yeah. Okay. Well, so that way we model it, right? But I mean, as far as like with the freelance aspect, that's not something that, because it's not sexy, right? We don't go and say, well, I'm going to model a 20-mile railroad and I'm going to have one little paper mill on it, and the rest of it is going to be storage cars, and those cars are going to sit there. Nobody's going to go and do that. I mean, that's just not the way the hobby is geared, so to speak. And it's a lot of money to have sitting there doing nothing,
Yeah.
But so Cece, right? See, Chris.
Yeah.
Illinois Midland, Chris.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So with your layout,
Yeah.
the way it is,
Okay.
and your map the way it is, you've created like this really neat believability factor that this could have been something in real life.
Yeah, if I had
right?
enough revisionist history, yes.
Yeah. So is there any way that you have found that you want to maybe start leaning towards like refining that believability factor, like trying to narrow it down so get it more pinpointed in a direction? Or is it just you're kind of where it's at is where it's at?
Well, I think like, how I justify, because I think a lot of this, the proto freelance or freelancing is, it's what your OCD can stand. And that's a lot of mine is what, like, it's just like how I have to justify this or it's not going to work. And it's, I used history in my favor, of like when the Illinois Central was cutting down on their main line to save money because they were trying to, the goal was for them to get bought by Canadian National.
Right.
So the whole thing about saving money. So that's how I justified the Illinois Midland doing the contract switching for Decatur was, it's an experiment that, because another thing too was that, this experiment of me switching Decatur only worked till 1999 because, the wet noodle came in and took over. So that's what I call, Canadian National. But, so, it's, so I guess that's why I stopped at 95, because my whole, what happens after the UP buys SP, and then the merger with, with Canadian National taking over the IC, my whole, like, my railroad of little lies just falls apart. So.
Well, and I guess that's one of the things is like you have Eric Broman's Utah belt,
right.
And Alan McClellan, the V&O. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, and now I dug these out in the last, March of 2023. Here's the V&Os on there.
Yeah.
The V&Os in there. February of 23. Why freelance? Another beautiful little freelance railroad. The Tenemo Western is in there. July of 23. This is a gorgeous layout. You would never believe how big this layout is by looking at the way he's got this set up. This is not a very large layout, but it acts like a big layout. Michigan Interstate, another beautiful layout. The gearing towards the Alan McClellan V&O, the Utah belt, making these freelance railroads believable rather than just, I'm just going to do this. It has really come into its own. And now when you got a guy like #NotSponsored with Chris Palomari out at Home Shops, they've, with making HO scale cars for freelance railroads.
3-notch. Patrick Harris from 3-notch.
Yeah.
He makes, like, I don't know how I've bought in the last 2 years his freelance covered hoppers. I think I've bought 24 in the last 2 years. And like, I got a closet full of AccuRail cars I need to put together for free, his own railroad and other railroads, and I'm like, he had 3 for he comes up with these on his own. Like, he goes over statistics for like soybeans and what each county grows, and he comes up with a based on like the local history, like their logo for their county, and he comes up with these freight cars, and he's got one for Indiana. I bought 3 of them. It's like Pulaski County, Indiana. It's near Logansport, I think it is. I bought all 3 of them, and that it's believable because it's like, they, it's Indiana. They grow like corn and soy there, and the cars are real, and they looked real to me. I'm going to put them on my railroad. I'm going to throw them in a train.
Yeah, it's really kind of it's really kind of interesting to to see how some of this stuff actually kind of gets handled in the industry nowadays, especially, Matt, like with your layout and everything, like what are some of the things that you're finding for the believability factor? Do you find that you're starting to, like you said, you were starting to lean more and more towards a prototype,
Right.
but yet you're still doing a freelance type of thing?
Mm-hmm.
Are you starting to, it sounds to me like you're starting to narrow that believability factor down for your layout.
Yeah, I think that for me, it's as I get to understand. Well, it's as simple as just when you pick a car up, at a hobby shop and you're looking at it, just having an understanding of, well, what years does this car represent? Is this car too new for my model railroad, or is it just far too old? When I was first kind of collecting cars, I'm modeling the Pacific Northwest, so if it's got a BN on the side of it, that's good enough for me. And then as the years go on, you realize like, oh, well, this is, like it didn't make the transition over to BNSF, so it's too old for what I need here, this kind of thing. So, for me, it's definitely been my learning experience, my research into just the world of railroading. As I get just a little more knowledgeable, I'm able to kind of focus things down, narrow things down, and that focus is what's bringing a lot of the believability to my freelancing efforts. And it helps having a prototype that you can lean on and say, like, I'm modeling my version of this thing. Because when you see a video and you see a bunch of, BNSF paper box cars rolling down the track, I got to buy those, I need 6 of them because there's six rolling in front of me right here. It's rough on the pocketbook, but
isn't that the worst feeling? You're sitting there watching a train go by and you're like, need one of them.
Yeah.
Need one of them.
Yeah.
I need 3 of them. The next thing you know is you're you're sitting there watching 100-car train go by and you just spent $1,300.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous sometimes. I mean, Chris Bell, what about you? What do you think? What are your kind of believability factor things when it comes to your freelance layout?
And that's the question, is do you have a brand loyalty or buy-in? I know, a year ago you were talking about you have the Milwaukee type switch stands. I mean, those kinds of things. And then taking a look, and I can't remember who it was, David Barrow or Tony Kester, model what you see.
Yeah.
So, that really, there aren't palm trees in Iowa, that kind of thing. But it's also just kind of, Iowa, Wisconsin look a lot alike, but there's some differences, definite differences in the way towns are laid out. I mean, that's a rabbit hole I've gone down with history, and trying to find a typical small town, to model. It's like, okay, where was the depot at? And then that, I think it was a Great Western book I had that was talking about how they helped plat out towns. And of course, the depot was right there in downtown, right at the end of Main Street. So, that sort of thing. And then also era specific. So you see so many guys, I got really into the rabbit hole of cars and in scale in particular, it's limited. That's where that 3D printing is kind of opening up new avenues for scratch building but believability to me is that if you're modeling a region and you're interchanging with certain things, because if your freelance is part of the real world, as it were, what does that interchange look like even? I mean, a lot of people don't give a lot of thought to is it a simple track? Is it a yard? Is it, and then who owns,
why is that car there?
Well, and who owns that track? I mean, Pink Lady ballast on a Northwestern line that you interchange with versus just cinders, because that's what your small railroad had was. It's still in the dirt, you know.
Yeah, you're in the mud. You're if you're modeling the Chicago Northwestern and you've got a C&W yard, it's in the dirt. You're in the mud. I mean, trust me. I mean, and there's nothing holding anything together. If it rains, you feel like you're going to fall right straight through the middle of the earth. I mean,
well,
it's bad.
Yeah, you know? I lived just right next to the old Emmett St. L main through Marshalltown, Iowa. And it was in the dirt, and that was in the 80s. It was in its highlight, you know. But
so with that being said, though, with what Chris was saying about like with the Northwestern and everything, that comes around to another portion of the believability factor. And Clark, as an MMR, I want to hear what you've got to say with that, because with a lot of times people take for granted, they want their ballast on their layout so pristine and it has to be perfect. It's got to be this. And railroad yards are, unless it's brand spanking new, freshly laid rock, it's anything but clean. It's anything but perfect. So over the years, have you seen a transition with freelance layouts getting more and more like the prototype when it comes to track work?
Well, I think for track work especially, you look at a number of layouts, especially I see Tom Johnson, and I've never met the gentleman, but boy, I certainly follow his layout or his stuff that he puts out, and it's fantastic. And Tommy K, I know Tom as well, and or even Mr. Gazier, that Split Rock there. You look at their railroads, it's not, perfect. It is what, and as somebody said in the scene or in the chat, and you guys have said, it's what you see. It's not, it's like when people are doing field grass and stuff. It is not bright green. Nobody goes out and waters beside the railroad.
That time of year.
Yep. Yeah. And that's something Boomer is adamant about doing it. If you're using static grass, paint your grass, take that tone from out of the package and knock that down, because railroads use Roundup,
Yep. And so I think, and that's where I think some of that
railroads with money.
Well,
railroads with money, right?
With the big stuff, okay, but I mean, for the most part, especially branch lines and stuff, if you look at some of the photos that people have put up from rail fanning, oh my God, you wonder how the stuff even stays on the track. Never mind, how it's ballasted.
Yeah.
So I think and modelers have to look at that. I think Chris, I think you said about model what you see, and I know I was watching in the chat. I said that Mr. Johnson said that same thing about modeling, and that's what he does. And when you look at his scenes, wow, do they ever jump out at you?
Palmieri.
I figured Palmieri would go throw kudzu in there. That's like that. But you're 100% correct, right? I mean, it's one of the few things that, as a modeler, whether we're doing prototype modeling, freelance modeling, proto-freelance modeling, when it goes into the shipbuilding industry, the ship modelers. I mean, Chris, I see you've got a lot of military stuff. You must be have done military modeling in the past, and stuff. Like for water, for people that model ships and boats, water is water, but water is always different. It's not, it's not the same. Atlantic Ocean water looks different than Pacific Ocean water. And, and Indian Ocean water looks different than all sorts of Mediterranean seas look different. I mean, the water looks different depending on where you are on the globe. And especially, it's harder to model currents and things like that. We could start talking about ballast that way too. Mm-hmm. You might have two railroads that come and get their rock from the exact same quarry and dump the exact same number of cars, and their main lines are going to look vastly different. Yeah. They're just going to be different. you know, it all concrete ties versus wood ties. I don't know very many freelance modelers that model railroads with concrete ties. You know, I mean, that's a big railroad thought process right there, you know?
Well, yeah. And sorry to break in here.
No, go right ahead. That's what this is.
When you're modeling a freelance railroad, I think it's doubly important that you take a look at those details because, you know, if you're modeling, say, you know, the BNSF or whatever, people generally have an idea of what that is, what type of railroad it is, how they maintain their equipment, you know, how they maintain their track work and that kind of thing. But if you're modeling a freelance railroad, you have to tell that story for the person, because someone coming to your Facebook page or coming to your lab to take a look at your stuff won't have that backstory, won't have all that, you know, to come to your layout with, so all that knowledge. So the story you tell through, you know, how well maintained your track work is, or, you know, how many weeds are in between the track and that kind of thing, what the water looks like, what the trees look like, what the rock looks like. You know, that really sets your railroad, your freelance railroad in a real environment, in a real setting, you know, telling your story about the economic conditions of your railroad and the customers around your railroad and all that kind of stuff. That storytelling through your modeling process is very, very important for a freelance railroader.
And one of the things,
this is really real quick, Chris, before you go with your response and stuff, Heath brings up a really good point here. And this goes right into like a paying attention to those details, right? I'm in Heath's corner on this. I don't have transitions between, my sidings are not higher or lower than the main line. You know, all my track is the same level.
Mm-hmm.
But my cork is only a 16 thick. It's not real. I don't have like Midwest, what is that? Midwest manufacturing.
Yeah, Midwest cork.
Midwest cork. I don't have that stuff. Mine is like 5 times smaller than that, because my railroad is in the dirt. So I wanted to model that with the ballast, with the sub-road bed. And Heath, to answer your question, absolutely not. You don't need to have your ballast all on different levels if you don't, or your road bed on different levels. If you don't want to do that, don't. You know, and that's the thing. That's usually reserved for mainline, high steel, class 1 type railroad type stuff. So
one of the things I do that I forget who kind of instilled that in me years and years ago was, if I'm doing something on the railroad, I mark it down. I have a little spiral binder that I keep, and I mark it down and my reasoning for it. And then I try to keep the same reason through the whole layout. So I'm not changing situations. I'm not going from one color ballast to another. Like, you know, there's a reason for it. And that helps me keep me on track. I think, Matt, you were talking about the same thing about, you know, you're progressing through the layout, but, you know, on a substantial layout, you get to a certain point and you go, what the hell did I do 25 feet back down that way?
Right.
Because it's taken you 3 months to get to where you are, and you forget about it. And I see there must be another Canadian here, because John Garvin's talking about ballast, and what in Sudbury, and Mike, you were up in the Sudbury area.
Oh yeah.
They took slag from the nickel mines and used it as ballast because it was cheap.
It's readily available, and there's a ton of it, and there's nothing else to do with it.
You got that right.
Yeah.
And like he says, well, you can't find that in the hobby stores. But I think that's all goes to the believability of your railroad that you're trying to achieve. Now, not everybody wants to do that. They'll just keep it in the back of their mind. Hey, don't forget to do this. But I think if you're like me, especially as I'm getting older, I do write things a lot more than what I used to keep a continuity, which then people appreciate in the layout. It starts to show up
right
in the continuity. And I think that's one of the biggest things. And it doesn't matter if you're building a large railroad, a small railroad, a switching shelf. If you do certain things and have a reason, then you can come back and say, oh yeah, I remember I was just going to keep everything level. And the reason is because I'm in the mud.
No,
Yeah,
no. I was just going to ask you a question about that, Chris. On your layout, do you do that? Are you on multi levels, or are you on one level, or how do you have your main line all set up and everything?
Well, I got cork sheeting from Michaels, and I got the 2 different thicknesses. And all I did was I just there's a main line that goes to the middle of the yard, and that's gonna be on the thicker cork. That's gonna be on the thicker cork, and everything else is gonna be on the thinner cork. And I also am using 83 and 70. Using Pico. But I go back to the yards. There's a professional railroader on my group named John Cordillo, who at one time worked for the CSX, and I believe he works for the Decatur and Eastern now. But he gets some of those pictures I use were that he put on my Facebook page, and he told me in the mid 90s the yard, the IC yard, was full of gopher holes. Like, you had to watch where you step because of gopher holes, because of all the spillage, from the grain for the covered hoppers. And I'm thinking I know I'd have to put pigeons, because the pigeons are going to eat the spillage. But now I need to maybe get mini prints to do groundhogs or something like that, and put a couple in the yard. And I got to model a hole for a gopher. It's there's rock. There's gonna be holes in the rock from the gophers because they want to eat the corn or the soy. So it's that's something I can, especially like he said, the mid 90s was during the time IC was before the, Canadian National took over. That was an issue in the yard, was gopher holes, and you had to watch where you walked.
Yeah. So we're going to move on to the next little part here. And okay, let's see here. Chris, you had a little presentation. Clark has a presentation, right? Matt, you have one? You've got one. And Chris, do you have a little one? Or do you have one too, Chris Bell?
Just a short.
Let's start with you.
Okay.
Why don't you cue up your presentation here quick?
Let me see. And remind me, how do we... Oh, present. There it is.
Yep. You go to present and then share screen. And then you should be...
One second. There we go. All right. And
don't worry about it. This is our high quality production value that we've always, All right. I don't see anything yet.
All right. There we go. 1 second. There we go.
All right.
Are you there? All right. So,
yep. There we go. And
so
here.
Oh.
There we go.
All righty. Well, that kind of gives everything away, but let me get this big.
Yeah, we'll have to go to the full screen part of it. If you got a full screen.
Let's see. Nope, that's not the one. Shoot. All right. Well, this may or may not work. All right. Well, so this was one of my first influences. So this young kid from the Minnesota Western, I mean, a lot of people seem to model variations of the Minnesota Western. It was an M and St. L little piece that they owned. And I mean, he had simple ideas, his locomotives, he blanked out a little bit of the UP on this one, and then he actually leased UP power. So his idea on a 4x8 of vignettes is something that took me away. And then this guy right here, that was my first freelance drawing back in '89. I didn't know what I was doing.
That's pretty good, dude. That's actually really good. Holy cow. Yeah. That's actually impressively good. Holy cow.
But I don't even remember what LNN stood for. I'm like, and knew nothing about paint schemes or I don't even know what I think I copied this out of a model railroader. They used to have the black and whites. So I did a lot of paper railroading. So not in the armchair necessarily. And just like you, Mike, I heard you're around the layout podcast, and rabbit holes. I know several. And
I know.
Being a fan of history, so I came up with all this paperwork, for the scheme, how it was going to be. And then I even I had another idea. It was the Clinton, Muscatine, and Burlington, which that's my initials. They were doing a regionals and review thing in their magazine years ago. And so I wrote up I was working for the college newspaper, and I used their software, and I made my own magazine article, 1991.
That's cool.
I think.
Wow.
Totally made that up. And then I had found there was a booklet at an antique store, and it has the actual what these logos are, who they are, and it was a quiz. So they had the actual ones in black and white, and then on the back it said what railroad owned them. I'm like, this was a great idea to start with. So I would put a piece of tracing paper down, because this is the years before the internet or computers at home, which 1991, who's going to have a computer at home? That I used those for ideas, and it's like regional, like here's Cotton Belt in reverse. So of course they were all reversed. So that opened you up to new ideas, because Cotton Belt is flipped around on that side, and then I came up with the Great Central Route, which was basically the M and St. L and the Wabash and TP&W, because I read, my wife was going to college at the time, and I sat in the library for 8 hours a day while she was in class, because we commuted, and I worked nights, so I would just hang out at the college library, and I read that TP&W and M and St. L tried to merge at one point, which would have been a great route around Chicago.
That would have been a lot of fun to have gone and seen if that would have actually happened.
Right. And then as this kind of gives away, the Kansas City Northern Lines was another one that I came up with. It was an actual proposed merger of Kansas City Southern, and can you guys tell who that would be?
I don't know. I've never seen that logo before.
I know.
It's the Chicago and Great Western.
Yeah.
Really?
The Lucky Strike. Yeah.
Jeez,
That's the Lucky
Louise.
Strike. Great Western.
I know that.
With Kansas City Northern Lines. Yeah.
Hey,
sure.
You guys, can we do a quick sound check? You hear me okay?
So I came up with two versions of it.
Yep. I hear you fine, Andy.
Yep. You're good, Andy.
Yes. Yep.
All right. Sorry about that.
So then, so I thought Great Central, I had logos, I had everything. It was kind of based on everything looked like stuff from England. So English outline, they were talking about, they had backstories and stuff to all their layouts, and why this particular engine's on there. We bought this from that, and so I went down that rabbit hole for a while. Kansas City Northern, and then being part of Des Moines Track, there was a guy, Brian Oakley. One of his modules was this huge engines house with BN and BNSF equipment when BNSF was first coming out, and it said Des Moines Union engine yard or engine terminal. I'm like, what's that? And he's telling me about the Des Moines Union, and of course Des Moines Track is DMN Track, and I'm like, okay, Freelance. This is a real. Des Moines Union was a railroad. It was partly owned by the Wabash, partly owned by the Milwaukee, and they had their own equipment. And then when Milwaukee folded, and Norfolk Western took over Wabash, then Burlington Northern kind of took over the Milwaukee share. So I'm like, wow, you can take a real thing and make it yours, and then I liked seeing trains run, so I switched to Des Moines in central Iowa, so we can get out in the country, and I can get some space, because Des Moines Union was all in town. And it didn't make it to the cut slides. But Des Moines Union switched at Iowa Transfer Yard, where 10 railroads switched, interchanged in 14 tracks at the base of the Iowa Capitol building, basically. And kind of right there, if anybody's from Iowa, they know Short Line Yard. It was right next to that. And there's a picture on Facebook on my Des Moines Union group that there's like 10 stop signs for all the different railroads crossing each other just to get to that yard. Yeah, so you had to stop, make sure the way was clear, and they were just simple posts. So I'm like, okay, 10 railroads, I can run whatever I want. I can have a Milwaukee road.
It takes a little guesswork out of things, doesn't it?
Right, it did. And it was all my favorite railroads, the Wabash, the Milwaukee, the M and St. L went through there, Great Western went through there, Rock Island, and Chicago Northwestern, they're kind of the railroad. They were the Borg before the Borg took over the Northwestern.
Hey, I resemble that remark.
I know. So I have, it's basically a 12 by 12 area in the basement, and kind of made an M shaped layout. So it's basically Des Moines, and now it's going to be countryside running to get out here. So the Des Moines and Central Iowa owned the Fort Dodge, Des Moines and Southern. There was a guy that commented on your podcast about Freelance Week that he's got the Fort Dodge, Des Moines and Southern. These guys actually owned Fort Dodge, Des Moines and Southern, but they were smaller. They just switched. Basically, their bread and butter was the Firestone plant here. And then they had a lot of industries along the river, and this is all now urban. It's all now houses and stuff. There's none of these industries left. But they had like 30 industries right there that they were switching, little mom and pop, 3-4 cars at a time, and then went out to what we call Fort what is that? Fort Des Moines is down here. Shoot, I can't think of that. Camp Dodge. That's it. Camp Dodge. Having a brain fart. Camp Dodge was a big military installation at one time, and they had interurban, so you could have interurban cars, and then freight railroad. So I'm modeling the 60s right before the Chicago Northwestern absorbed them and run down here and meet. It didn't really meet the Des Moines Union to get to Transfer Yard, but it will. So tried to keep it 5 minutes or less, but yeah. So let me stop sharing there. So
are you
I've
doing
come around?
Is that all N scale or HO or
N scale? Yeah, N scale.
That's
so
cool.
You get a lot of room. Yeah, and I wanted to get open running, so that's that. Is it ops? Is it rail fanning? And it's that blend of those two, because where I grew up, it was kind of like a British layout where I grew up. You could hear the Northwestern coming down the old M and St. L line, and they were a mile away, but I could see them through the trees. And there was like a grove of trees on the right and the left, and you'd see the F unit come through, and the next F unit, and then a Jeep, and then each car in its turn. And I'd sit there with binoculars, as a 5-year-old, 7-year-old, watching the trains go through one car at a time. So that was one thing I wanted to have. But trying to that believability factor, because the Des Moines, Central Iowa, I mean, basically everything on that, where the 30 industries, they took that out. The city came through and made all those industries move.
That's very cool.
Oh, Jason Clockey, does your line have a parent company? So Des Moines and Central Iowa was separate, and then Salzburg took it over. He owned a whole bunch of. He was kind of like a modern or a 1960s version of Watco or Rail America. He had a lot of little railroads that were like barely profitable. that he tried to keep profitable. Ideally, my Des Moines in central Iowa has some influence from my favorite Wabash and Milwaukee. You're going to see those on there.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. The 30 by 60 inch railroad. I wish I could get those pictures. They wouldn't load. I don't know why. Computer glitch. But it was just kind of tucked in a corner, and it was mostly switching. But I had one long line for interchange, and whoever could come in, any of 10 railroads. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah.
Who do you want to have go next there, Andy?
Yeah. Clark, you're the night owl, right? So we'll have you bring down the house here. Matt, did you get to go yet? I know, Chris, we did your video and talked through yours. So why don't we go ahead and put Matt up there on the big screen, and then we'll get Clark to come through and kind of talk about how he's changed his tune, so to speak, here coming down the stretch after hanging out with the section crew. So
Okay.
Yeah, Matt, let me see here. Are you doing some sharing and things?
Yeah.
Bring up a little presentation. Sorry about the misfire here on my end. I was getting some coaching on my volume levels, and then I went to do some stuff and things, and then I ruined everything because I went and touched something I shouldn't have. So,
Isn't that the way it always goes?
Yeah, Matt, we'll bring you up here in just a second. I see a track plan.
Okay.
That looks good. But yeah, Mike did a fantastic job. I was actually sitting there watching without any audio. So good work keeping the fires burning. And I saw there was quite a bit of heckling from Ray.
I wasn't even paying attention to Ray. I was trying to keep things moving. I'm like wondering where the heck you went. And I'm like, oh boy, this is going to be great.
Yeah, and good job, Chris Bell. That was really
cool.
That
was really cool. That was very cool.
Tail end of that. Thank you. All right, Matt, take it away.
Okay. So yes, I am modeling the Midland Falls Railroad. That's the name of my freelance model railroad. It is based in the Pacific Northwest. It runs between the towns of Usk, Washington, all the way over to Sandpoint, Idaho, where it interchanges with the BNSF. It's based heavily on the Pend Oreille Valley Railroad, which is the real short line railroad that runs over these tracks. And yeah, the layout itself is 14 by 20 feet. It exists in a room in my basement that I kind of sort of halfway built myself. It's set up really for one or possibly two operators to spend a couple hours operating on. And then I got a little bit of staging, and I've got some space for continuous running so that I can sit back with a beer and just watch trains run around my layout when I'm not in the mood to have a throttle in my hands.
Smart.
Yes.
I like that. I like that. I subscribe to that theory.
Yeah.
I actually got a motorman from Iowa Scale Engineering, hashtag not sponsored, just for that. And because I'm a point to point, I got it just so that I could have something going back and forth
while he drinks his beer.
While I drink beer, yes.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, for me, I didn't have that on my old layout. My old layout was just a shelf switcher. You know, it was about 12 feet long, and I really missed just watching trains run. So for me, on this layout, it was important to have that option if I wanted to just have the ability to run trains around in circles. So freelance model railroaders, we love our logos, we love our paint schemes, we love choosing the locomotives that we're going to represent on our layout, and I'm very much the same with that. For me, I was modeling a scrappy little short line that was just getting by on very little money, and so every penny counted, and I wanted that to be reflected in my paint schemes I chose and all of that. So locomotives I'm running on my layout, I've got a An SD40-2, that's it's a patched out BNSF. That's a patched out BN, because my all-time favorite locomotive is a Cascade Green SD40-2. And it's something, as a freelance model railroader, you have the opportunity to bring your favorite stuff onto your layout. And so this is how I'm doing it here. Lease units are also very popular amongst small short line railroads. And so I've got a helm leasing unit here as well. That'll eventually get patched out for the MFR. Both those units will be weathered down quite a bit. We talked a little bit earlier about the story you tell with your model railroading. And for freelancers, probably what your locomotives look like, what your rolling stock looks like is like, that's the number one way you're telling your story about your freelance layout. So in the lower left there, you see a car that I'm currently weathering, and, for my layout. And I want it to look old and grungy and used and owned by somebody else before the Midland Falls got a hold of it. And when they did, all they did was just slap some paint on it, some stencils, and then called it a day. And so this is just all part of the storytelling that goes with my freelance railroad. Another great thing that freelance railroaders have is you don't have to follow the prototype necessarily. And so when you have a smaller space like I do, and you're limited by, the shape of it and the fact that you have to have swing gates for doors and stuff, it's great to not have to try to force the track plan that closely matches the prototype into a space, and you get to have a little more freedom, a little more ability to play around a little bit. So I've got this one spot on my railroad where the Ponderay River the railroad passes over the Ponderay River. And in my case, I have both the Union Pacific track work and the MFR track work passing over the river at the exact same spot. It's not like that on the real railroad. On the real railroad, they do cross the river, but they do it at 25 miles apart from each other. But on my layout, I'm doing it side by side, and I got a little bit of an angle on them here. So they're sort of crossing almost in a V shape. And it's going to really give me a great opportunity to model a really interesting, impactful scene. And I can pull, the real model, the real bridge that the Union Pacific uses, the real bridge that the Ponderay Valley Railroad uses, and bring them into my model railroad and model those for real, just side by side. And have a little fun with that, and be able to make an impact in that way. I think it's really important for a freelance model railroader to take a look at the real scenery around the location that you're going to be modeling, and find a way to incorporate that kind of look and feel into what you're doing in your model railroad, while still allowing yourself the freedom to make those adjustments so that something is artistically pleasing to you and fits what your needs are as a modeler. The scene that I'm creating here is very much a work in progress. I'm taking the boomer diorama approach to scenery, where it's going to be layers and layers and layers until I finally get it to looking the way I want. So imagine a lot more bushes and trees and weeds and all sorts of things on this. But on the left, we have the real location. You're standing on the highway overpass. The tracks are running below you there, and you've got a large rock cut. And I wanted that sort of look and feel on my layout somewhere. So I'm recreating it here, except I'm doing it my way. I'm adjusting the shade of the rocks to a slightly different color, just one that I find a little more pleasing. I'm making the rock cut look a little bit more natural. And instead of that rock cut kind of being over the road, it's over the train tracks here. So taking the real thing and then skewing it, adjusting it, kind of making it your own, but something that hopefully somebody who, is visiting from the area can look at and go, yeah, this looks like the kind of thing that I see back home. One of the major reasons why I chose the Ponderay Valley Railroad as my sort of inspiration for my freelance version of the railroad was because I love 2-bay covered hoppers, and I wanted an industry somewhere in the Pacific Northwest that used those. So I just did a quick Google search for cement industry, Pacific Northwest. I found a little town called Midland Falls that had a cement plant. I said, perfect. That's all I need to know. And I created the Midland Falls Railroad based on that. Doing more research down the road, I found out that like cement no longer existed in Midland Falls. It hadn't been there since the early 90s. And so, that gave me an opportunity to like kind of adjust history a little bit for my layout. And so on my layout, the cement plant, shut down in the early 90s, but they just moved it south. They moved it down to Usk, Washington, and got it out of Midland Falls and built a brand new state-of-the-art cement plant in Usk, Washington. And so that gave me sort of, that allowed me the freedom to bring cement back to the area. And the inspiration you're seeing on the left there is a cement plant that's in California. But I'm using that as I build out my version of it. It's going to look quite a bit different from that, but it's just inspiration for what I want to do for my cement plant. So it's just a way to kind of take sort of the history of a place and update it and allow yourself the freedom to, even though I'm doing a much more modern interpretation of the railroad, I can still take a lot of what the history of what made the prototype really exciting and bring it into my modeling efforts. There are a couple of really key scenes on the prototype that I am going to include in my railroad. There's a tunnel called the Blue Slide Tunnel, which has a wooden portal on one end and this kind of really unique concrete one on the other end. I'm going to go so far as to actually purchase a resin printer so that I can model that concrete portal as accurately as possible. And this is where, as we talked earlier, like as I'm getting more and more into like the real thing, right? I'm bringing a lot more of those real elements into my freelance version of the layout. So that's one of those things where trying to model something as accurately as possible as it is on the real thing. I'm finding that kind of thing to be a lot more exciting.
Now, let me ask you a question there, Matt.
Sure.
Are you going to model the crack?
Yes. 100%, of course.
Because see, that to me actually gives that whole portal a real character to it.
Yeah.
And it really doesn't, it won't look like it's just something like some other cookie cutter portal. That actually shows Earth settling, and it shows, it shows that it's been around for a while. That's a really cool looking picture.
Yeah.
You pull that off, that's going to be awesome.
Well, and it goes back to telling the story of your railroad, right? I mean, this is a railroad that has a ton of history to it. And that crack really represents a lot of the age and the history and the fact that the railroad is probably not going to have the money to go back and fix that tunnel portal. They're going to, as long as it's holding up, all the rock above it, they're going to just going to leave it as is. So yeah, I mean, little details like that, I think are really, really important for a freelance a modeler to kind of take into account when they are designing and building the scenery and that kind of thing. The bridge you see on the right here, I think probably 90% of all the photos that exist of the Pend Oreille Valley Railroad is of this bridge. Everything kind of north of Usk at this point in time that I'm modeling, which is 2016, was all excursion trains. It was a big excursion train that would take people up to Midland Falls. And this bridge right here is a really sort of a big dramatic scene with the hydroelectric dam below it. I'm modeling that as well. Neither of these two scenes here are anywhere near the area that's actually exists on my layout in real life. They're many, many miles, 20, 30 miles in the case of the bridge away. But I can't not model it. They're just too cool. I have to be there. So I found a way to sort of work it into my plan.
That's pretty neat.
Yeah. And finally, last slide. You may ask, well, if you're doing freelancing, why even bother with a prototype? If doing things your way is that important to you, that you're stepping away from the prototype to kind of venture out on your own as a freelancer, why bother with a prototype at all? And I think this photo really is one of those things that really draws me back to the prototype. So what you're seeing here is the same scene as the previous slide with that bridge over that dam, but you're seeing it before the railroad came into the valley. This was how people and goods moved up and down the river before the railroad was this steamboat. And this is the steamboat Meadowline.
What an awesome tie-in! Holy cow!
Yeah, it's really like there's stories of people. You know, one of the most popular things to do on this particular boat was to play a game of poker while you would make your way up the river. And I can't imagine being able to concentrate on my cards when you're going through rapids like this. It's crazy.
On a paddle boat, no less, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
But the history of the area that I've as I've done more and more research, you know, it started as just it was just a cool sounding name with a cement plant, and that's all it was, you know, 10 15 years ago now. But as I've done more and more research over the years and I've gotten closer and closer to the prototype, it's things like this, the history of the area and the people that made the area what it is, and you know, how the area has changed over the years as the railroad helped to shape it and bring prosperity to the land, and how now a lot of that industry is gone. The railroad's starting to struggle. It's a really poor area of the country now, unfortunately, but there's a lot of really interesting sort of history there, and interesting things you can do to kind of represent that railroad in your freelance efforts. And so that's why I love freelancing and why I love proto freelancing specifically.
Here's a question here. Are you gonna put the boat on your layout? You have to at least model that boat at one point. I mean, just even if you have it on a display case on the side near that scene or under the scene to show like the past and and present type stuff.
Well, I'm a big fan of boats, so definitely in the future, I think I could see myself doing something like that for sure.
That would be so neat.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool for sure. Well, that's all I got.
That's fantastic.
That's awesome.
That's all.
Cool. And this is all at one level, right?
Yeah, it is. It's all single. In fact, I don't even have a grade at all in the layout. So for operational purposes, I want to be able to park a car anywhere and not have it roll away. So even though I'm modeling very mountainous region, I'm letting the mountains kind of do the work to kind of give you the feeling of moving through the space and keeping my track work as level as I possibly can.
And you're HO then?
HO, yep.
Okay,
yep. Yeah, I had an N-scale layout back in the day, and I liked it. But when I got back into the hobby, when I walked into a train shop one day, and I picked up an Athearn 2-bay covered hopper, and I saw photo etched roof walks and all these little wire grab irons and details on a car that was like $20, and I was like, oh my gosh, this exists. Like, I was away from the hobby for a few years, and I come back and now this exists. This is incredible, you know. So I moved to HO at that point for the detail.
So I have a question real quick, Matt. So what's been your biggest challenge as you I don't know if you covered this in your presentation, but so you know, you got a lot of great ideas and things that we're all dying to see come to life here. But what so far on your journey, what's been your biggest challenge with your layout, or actually your freelance railroad, I should say?
Yeah, I think operations has been my biggest challenge. In fact, I have my first operating session is happening in 2 weeks, and I'm fighting JMRI to get a switch list that makes sense for my layout right now, and I'm struggling with it, and it's been an issue. But being someone who, when I first came into the hobby, it was very much about the models, you know, the scenery, painting, backdrops, all that kind of, you know, making it look realistic and make it feel realistic. That was the trains part of it was kind of like the icing on the cake. It was modeling with something cool moving through the scene, right? And now that I'm kind of getting older and I'm getting more into the trains part of it, learning the operations, learning how, you know, stuff moves around on a layout or in real life. I think that is a little bit of a struggle. I mean, I've read Model Railroader over the years, and I read what everyone else says about operations, and some of it goes over my head. I'm learning, you know, I'm learning as I go. I run this layout here enough that I'm pretty darn happy with how it's running now myself. I'm nervous about bringing other people in who have a lot more experience with operations, what they're going to say about it. But
that might be the best thing to do, though. Really,
yeah. I'm pretty happy with the track plan as it exists now, and I think there's a good amount of flexibility there, and I think it's going to work just fine. A great thing about having a prototype to work from is you've got it right there. You know how the prototype ran. You know the industries they served, how often they served them, how many cars they took, where those cars came from, where they go to. So that helps out quite a bit. So as much as possible. One of the really hard things about the prototype that I'm using is there's seemingly very little information about it out there and available. Not a lot of people seem to railfan it. There's like 4 or 5 videos on YouTube for it, and that's about it. There's an issue of was a Railfan and Railroad magazine.
Yeah.
That features that prototype, and oh my gosh, there's pictures from different angles I'd never seen before. It was so excited to get that, and I got just a little bit more information, and so any of these little bits of information I can gather, I cling on to it because it's so precious to me because there's so little of it.
And that's the rabbit hole, isn't it? Of freelancing is finding that information, trying. I mean,
yeah. Well, it's a balancing act because you want that freedom to do it your way,
right?
But in order to make it look and feel real and to sort of satisfy,
you want to do it justice, right?
Yeah, you want to do it justice. Yeah. I definitely want to do the Ponderay Valley and the people who live there and the struggle that they've had over the years. I want to do all that justice in my modeling. And so it's really important to me to kind of get it right and get the look and the feel of it right. So, yeah.
One other thing, just as a suggestion, is I don't know about where out by you guys or any other parts of the country, or Clark, even up in Canada, but like in Wisconsin, a lot of small towns have their own historical societies. And so those can be amazing. You can find out, like, for your local township historical society or your county historical society, find out if there's information from them, because they may have information that goes way, way back that nobody ever even thinks about anymore.
Or if there's a Facebook page, because I found a bunch of photos.
Facebook pages are really, really good.
Flickr,
Lost Des Moines,
Flickr, Pinterest. Believe it or not, Pinterest is another one. Flickr, all those places are just. There's so many resources now. It's awesome.
Yeah, I live in Central Illinois, and so I am on a number of Facebook groups of like Pacific Northwest or Washington State or Idaho rail fans, and so I'm on their groups. So every time they get a shot of anywhere near Sandpoint. Oh, he's near Sandpoint. Where's he at in Sandpoint? I'm looking it up on a map, and I got Google Maps up and trying to triangulate and figure out like where it is. And
your ears perk right up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I follow History of the Heartland and Mid-Century Decatur, and it's like I've learned a lot in the last 2 years by being on those Facebook groups because I'm not from there. I never. So I'm 800 miles away, and I learn stuff all the time. Like I just posted pictures the other day of a Canadian National engine going over on the bridge over Pershing Road, and then it's like I'm like, oh yeah, I know where this is. Like, and it was on their page. I'm like, and once in a while you'll see Wabash. Chris, you would like it. Because Decatur was Wabash hub. Their main shops. The
I think I'm on the same page. On that same Decatur group, it keeps popping up as a suggestion for some.
Yeah, well, you should follow it. So
yeah,
but it's a great resource. Especially for somebody who's not from Illinois. Never other than going to boot camp, never lived in Illinois. So, but yeah.
Hey, I don't know if we touched on this real quick, but we do have a question. We'll take one of these quick and then carry on. Robert Gleitz says, any recommendations for buying decals for your freelance road?
Circus City decals, but you're going to pay for them.
I wonder.
he's not going to be cheap. But he's very easy to work with, but he does charge a setup fee, and it's for your first set of decals. So Circus City would be a good one that I would recommend. Highball Graphics would be another good one to go with.
Precision Design Company, Bill
Precision
Bellinger.
Design. Yep, Bill Brillinger. He'd be another one. Precision Design.
Yeah, I'm about to reach out to Circus City myself for my first sheet of decals. So it's good to know that he's easy to work with.
What was Bill's again? Precision.
PD, Precision Design Company. So he did the first run of the Mascoutin Valley decals for me, and that was a good experience. He was really good. I've gotten stuff from Circus City. I like them. But then our friends over at Around the Layout podcast, they recommend Highball Graphics.
Yep.
And yeah, they've been around for a long time. They do a lot of good stuff too.
Yeah. And talking about
a lot of the decals in place are regional.
Okay. Yeah.
Circus.
Right. I came that close to investing in a laser printer. I got the testers, stuff, and I've printed out a couple of things and mixed results with that, doing your own. But that's the graphics. I'm kind of a failed artist, I guess you'd say. Having done all that graphics.
So an artist.
Yeah. Oh, I don't think Andy saw the picture that I had of the hand drawn one, and then back in the days, again, before the internet, I take those articles about like the GP18s that Model Railroader would have, and I Xerox the heck out of them. And then I have like 18 pages of different types of paint schemes. And I was looking at stuff from France and stuff, something to make it look different. There was a guy who was saying, why not run an Australian SD70 Ace? Because they do look different. They're kind of cool looking. And I did.
Yeah.
And one of the rabbit holes I went down, I found a crazy book about early diesels. And like Germany and Russia were big on dieselization early on and what their stuff looked like. And I had a scratch built N scale thing that it failed miserably. It looked horrible. So it went in the trash. It went against the wall. But
Wabash.
It was a great idea. And,
the literal Wabash.
The literal Wabash.
Wabash cannonball.
There you go.
Sorry to interrupt. But
as we keep having discussion here, Clark, did you want to bring up your presentation? Let's not while he's doing that, we'll keep chinwagging here about Matt and the rabbit holes. That's for sure.
See, the best thing to do is to strap a 2x4x12 on your ass so you don't go down those rabbit holes. Because I've got a layout to build. I can't go down all these nut crap holes and stuff. Now, Matt, honestly, your whole presentation, you just keep talking and I'll show my slides. Because you and I apparently are coming from the same area. It's amazing how you think about how I think about layout. So that was pretty cool.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thank you.
All right. Well, so I do want to just remind the folks out in the section crew this evening, if you have questions for us, get them out there into the chat. And then at the end of this evening, at the end of the show this evening, we will be giving away that Home Shops Freelance Road for Michigan Interstate. It's a Tangent PS2 4750 covered hopper. So make sure you guys stick around to the end. And again, yes, thank you, Matt. That was a really cool presentation. I've always been a big fan of your railroad, but it was really neat to see the behind the scenes. 10. We're giving
Hey,
out grades.
Andy, I'm glad you're back because I got no idea how to have done that giveaway. So
Yeah,
I had no clue. I'm like, okay, how am I going to get the spinny thing to work, or how am I going to do that?
Yeah,
And I'm like,
it was my
we're gonna
dumbass
do.
trying to make audio updates on the fly, audio adjustments on the fly, and
See, I told you in the pre-show.
It was jinxed from go. We were jinxed from go.
Chris,
it went way
right?
too, yeah.
See, right? I told you guys, didn't I? I said it. I'm just saying. I'm not saying, but I'm saying. So, are we all set there, Clark?
Yeah, I was.
Well, now it says remove Andy Dorsch. Why does it say remove Andy Dorsch on my thing?
Yeah.
Oh, that's because
that's what you. There you go. USSR judge
7.5.
Clark, you're up and running here for the freelance and the prototype.
Or, as I say, my railroad following a railroad.
Yeah.
So,
good.
there's a little bit of introduction, and we'll go through everything. And then, Andy, I'm on full screen on my page, so you'll have to just tell me or ask me questions as we go.
You're good to go. I'll cue them up as we get them there, Clark.
So, where I'm actually modeling is the Huron Central, which is part of the Genesee and Wyoming family. They took over from Canadian Pacific. I'm not a big kind of, if I was going to follow the Huron Central, it would limit me to equipment and to motor power. So I kind of shied away from that. One of the questions that people were asking, like, how far do you guys live away from a prototype? I live about 20 miles from the main line of the Huron Central, and we'll talk about that as we go. So if you don't know who I am, this is a little bit about me. I've been involved in the NMRA as Andy sort of introduced me. I've been the vice president of MMR 225, which is a old number because I'm an old guy. If you've ever been to an NMRA convention, maybe you come and took mine with the masters. I developed it and then do hands-on programs for the NMRA. In our region, I was twice president, NMRA Canada president, blah, blah, blah. I was the host of the chairman or vice chairman for the Toronto Convention for the NMRA. We were going to be the largest convention ever in the NMRA. We had over 3,000 people booked, and then SARS hit. And we still ended up with 1,700 people coming to Toronto for that convention. So that was pretty good. I've been a past host of Train Masters TV for Model Railroad Hobbyists, talked to a lot of people there, Model Railroad regular on Model Rail Radio, New Tracks modeling. I also taught a night school course for many years, and a couple of people wanted to use my syllabus, including John Saxon, who's an MMR, and he taught in Australia for 4 years, and I thought that was kind of neat. I'm a rubber gauger. I model in anything. I just love modeling. Right now I'm building an HO layout, but I do have lots of T-track. I probably have 25 modules. I rescued actually rescued two ON30 layouts and one HON3 layout. One is the Erie aggregates, which was on the face of Craftsman a few years ago. I have that and a few others. So I live in Elliott Lake, Ontario now. I lived in the Toronto area and was a paramedic for 35 years and did lots of stuff. Yeah, it was a fabulous career. But now I live up in the middle of nowhere, and our little town is 10,000 people. So here's Elliott Lake way up here. What we're actually going to be talking about, I didn't really mark it on this map, but Sudbury is right here, and Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan is here. And basically, that yellow line is actually what's called Trans-Canada Highway, or Highway 17 in this area. It is basically the route of the Huron Central in this area. I was out fishing. This is actually on Lake Ontario last Saturday. And I hear the rumble and got out my camera, which is usually reserved for the fish I'm catching. But on this case, I was catching other items. and some trains
That's a
rolled
good
by. And it
catch.
was,
That's a pretty
Yeah.
good catch there, Clark.
well, we caught a lot of fish actually too. But yeah, no, this was a great catch, and it's a pretty remote area up here. The two major spots are Sioux and Sudbury, and Mike has recently been up here. He'll tell you there's not much up here but moose and beaver and deer and
Rock.
water, trees. That's my saying.
Yep.
When I retired, they said, "Where are you going to go?" I said, "Rock, water, trees, baby. That's where I'm going." Whoops. So as we talked about, here's sort of the headquarters in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, or Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. It was the predecessor was Canadian Pacific Railway. They ran this section, and it's roughly 173 miles. So it's not a huge railroad. We talked about this. Now, I don't know if I wrote this or if I got it from somebody, but this is what I was talking about earlier when somebody said, what is prototype freelance? And again, it's just about model railroaders, and to agree we're all proto freelancers. So it's really impossible to model all but the shortest railroads. And so we're all kind of proto freelancers in a way.
Yeah.
And then the three groups I talked about, layouts that draw heavily from one or more prototypes, a layout that are more specific railroads, real or fictional, and what if scenarios. Kind of what Chris was talking about his railroad, where he actually bought another railroad. And then, of course, the third one is the fictional railroad, which is great. I mean, if you have that in your head and you can sort of figure that out. I'm okay with some practices of that fictional stuff, but I can't get there to make it realistic. So I tend to fall back sort of to the first two where I lean on the prototype. Actually, this was just today. I had to run over to Sudbury, which is 2.5 hours from me, just to get there one way. And this was sitting there with a train, and they're getting ready to go to the Sioux. That's actually facing west on the main line. And these guys are from, these two locomotives were from Ottawa Valley or Ovar. And I guess they're doing some maintenance on maybe the Huron Central ones. But basically, they're same locomotives, just, it's got the painted different logo here.
I got pictures of that and video of that one. That set also when I went up there.
Do you? Oh, yeah. Great.
Yeah.
I wish I would have known you were here, because it would have been, we could have had a neat time. Anyway, here's kind of the line from Sudbury, Ontario. You can see where Ovar joins in here, and Ovar goes to Ottawa, the capital of Ontario, or capital of Canada, but it goes over there. So there isn't much along here. There's about 16 regular customers that they serve. Now, in Sudbury, there's the connection to, you can already see it's already been changed when I went on their site to CPKC. And here in the Sioux, it's on CN. And this is, you've probably heard of the Algoma Central Railroad. That's all up through here. And Nagawa Canyon is up through here. So this goes up the Hawk Junction where the CN meets its main line, basically. This was kind of neat. 199 storage spots available is, as we were talking earlier, Mike, you were talking about, how railroads make money. There's one of their ways to make money. This railroad was really on the cusp of dying last November. The government came in and gave them some money, and they decided that they would continue. So on my railroad, this is sort of the railway situated between Sudbury, which represented on my railroad by hidden staging tracks, single main line, two passing sidings that are very long. And again, the end of the line is Sault Ste. Marie. In the middle is a town called McCarroll. Now, McCarroll is really a main line and 2 tracks, and there's a Y there. And they have a couple of trailers, and that is sort of the middle of the line. And then that Y goes into Espanola, Ontario. Now, Espanola has got a huge paper facility, and it boy, you go into Espanola sometimes and it stinks. And all the locals say is that's the smell of money, baby, because it makes that town, it keeps that town alive, really. And it's pretty cool. So I modeled Espanola, which is actually in the hallway. Now it's much different than what it would be in real life, but it's in the actually hallway on the entrance to my layout room. So this is Espanola here on the right, and then you would go through the door into the main layout room. This is a shelf layout. It's roughly 15 feet or 15 inches wide by 8 feet. And I've just started really to do some scenery in here. I haven't really done much. So this is Espanola paper here, sort of representing a portion of their company. And there's a sort of wide view of it. These drawers underneath here are all for staging. They each hold 6. This track actually is I call it a CP interchange. So there's 6 spots in here for the cars, and there's 6 spots in here for this industry. And this this is a cement area, and there's a loading dock that usually goes in here with forklifts and stuff. So they do. That's the plan. And so there's another 6 cars in there because, like everybody else, I have more cars than spots. The middle drawer is actually for all the electronics. All the lighting is done in these buildings with like an LCD. It's and they're bicolor. They're multicolor. You program them to what color you want. And when the lights when the lights go out in the valance, all the lighting comes up in the buildings, and they change color. And then when you turn the lighting back on the valance, they go out.
Hey, Clark.
Yes.
What are you using for lighting in your valance? It looks very, I guess, nice and warm.
Yeah, there's a Canadian company out of Edmonton that sells LED lighting. It's 5,000 Kelvin.
Okay.
There's a gentleman here when I was in my narrow gauge group named Jerry Cornwall. Jerry used to own Mount Albert Scale Lumber, and I've known Jerry a long time, and he is a lighting professional. So he does a lot of lighting clinics and stuff. And years ago, I had him over at my home for a different layout that was a narrow gauge layout, and he explained he spent a whole day with me on lighting and about what you want to do. And so I learned a lot from him. So that's what I use now for him. So this is the entrance. It goes through the wall into the main layout room. This is a plastic pellet facility, from Walters. But the colors are actually from a pellet supplier in the Toronto area off the highway. That's the colors that they use. And I thought it was kind of neat to add some color to the layout. I use touch toggles on everything.
Okay.
So these are all, and this is all hand laid. For some of you who don't know, I'm very good friends with Tim Wares at Fast Tracks, and I do all the demos at most of the shows for him.
Yeah.
So when you walk in the room and you sort of immediately turn that tunnel, which is kind of crappy. I have to put some kind of in there. That's actually the drywall sticking out. That's the entrance into Espanola. And you'll see where there's valance, that scene for the big heavy scenery is done. I don't put any valance in until the scenery is done. So this is when you first walk in the room. So that width is just about 6 feet wide, that aisle.
Perfect.
And we were talking about space, Mike. You were talking about space. So this is my space. I like to watch the trains run. And this, Mike, you'll laugh because you were there at McCarroll. There's like a nursery and another building. This is McCarroll. This is McCarroll.
And they're on the opposite side of the highway from the tracks. It's like
they are. Yes, they are. Yeah, because the highway would be here in the aisle,
Yep.
And the buildings are on the other side of the highway. Yes.
Yep.
But I'm a building person. I love buildings, and I love scratch building them. I love building laser kits. I've made my own kits and used Tim's machines, so I had to have space for buildings.
Yeah, right.
This is my geyser gate.
Gotta have one of those.
It drops down, and it drops down and then locks into place underneath with two bolts, and it's all wired in through here. Now, there's that edge of that Espanola on the outside there. So
Hey,
here's
Clark,
the Go ahead.
We got a couple questions before we carry on to the next here.
Sure.
So real quick, going back to the lights in the Valence, what do you use for lighting control, and are they dimmable?
They are dimmable. Actually, what all my layout has got you. So from the wall out, I on the post here, I have bars, power bars.
Yeah. Okay.
And over here is the main guts. It's all I have two 5 amp NCE units, and the lighting actually they all join up. They all interconnect the lighting.
Okay. So yep.
So right from here to here, which is about 24 feet, somewhere around there, they're all one piece. And then the cord goes in behind here. I use styrene to curve the corners, and there's just styrene, and I just glue them up. And then I use 30 thou, so it's easy to mud that corner to hide them. So there's a break in that corner, obviously. So when at this end, did I show you that? No. Yeah. So at this end, when the lighting comes down here, there's that loop. There's a piece like this, and I just throw the cord back over it. You can't see it.
Right.
And it comes down to the post. Now, all those posts are numbered. I have 4 posts. And what I did, I went on Amazon and I bought the clickers, clap on, clap off type of thing.
Oh,
and
no
so
way.
when I don't have to crawl underneath the layout, I don't do anything like that. I can click all on, or I can click them on one at a time.
That's cool.
Now, in this layout, now in this room, and I should talk about this, these are LED panels. There's one here and one here, and they're at the same Kelvin as what these are. Now,
there you go.
When I'm working on the layout, I just put these on. I don't have the underneath lighting. Here, these are off, you can tell. And it's just that room is strictly those LEDs under here. And again, I'm not finished all the way along here, so there is no valance yet. It'll all be valanced and only lighting over the layout.
Sure.
And you may say, well, what's that got to do with Prototype or Freelance? But I think when I was developing the whole scenario of the layout, I thought about each and every individual piece, my scenery, how am I going to light it? Because I think it has to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And
it's
so
a critical part of your railroad.
Yeah. So, and then I put, I like it nice and sharp. Now, this is a fairly long span. So I have a chain that comes down. There's 1x2s going across here, and I have a chain come down, and there's a turnbuckle on it, and I can adjust it so that it's not bending or nothing.
Yeah, you can cantilever it.
Yeah. So so and that's a long run.
Nice.
So I don't know if that helps anybody.
No, that certainly helped a handful of people in the chat. They were asking questions about it.
Now, this I forget the term now. This is kind of like a layout without a helix. It crosses over itself twice. It crosses over here once, and at the other end, and at this end under here. Okay, and I'll explain that. So when you come out of McCarroll Yard, you're up on high, and you come across that geyser gate, and you're going to come through the bridges. That's a 1.8% grade down, and eventually you go into the tunnel on this corner. Here, let me show you. Whoops. I got to go back here. So you're going down 1.8. You go into this tunnel, and then all this is open, so you can see your train go into the hidden part. And then these areas are open so that there's junk in here, but this yard is actually duplicated underneath here, and that's my staging.
That's cool.
And then when you, let me see. Sorry. And then, so when you come out of staging, you're on that bottom piece, okay? And you can go to Espanola, or you can go through this tunnel, which there are no tunnels on this line. But that was, I tried to hide it, that it was a loop, so you weren't seeing the train all the time. And then it comes back up and then starts through McCarroll again. So you go around the room twice, basically. Now, one of the features I really liked, and Mike, you went by this going on your way to Sudbury. This is at the Spanish River. It's fairly close to Sudbury, probably about, say close, about an hour and 20 minutes. And this scene always fascinated me. And so they've got the old truss bridge, and it's over the Spanish River. Now, this flows about 2 miles downstream, and then you're on to Lake Huron.
That's not an easy bridge to get a picture of either.
It isn't. It's terrible. And so I'm on the highway here. This is it's only 2 lanes, and you got to be very careful because the trucks are going across Canada. You have to realize in Canada, we have what's called Trans-Canada Highway. 90% of all the population live 150 miles from the U.S. border, north. That's it. So the main highway, there is one basically main highway. There's other ones that will reconnect and you go up farther. But if you want to go from one end of the country to the other, you get on highway, Trans-Canada Highway, and just keep heading east or west. So it's pretty busy. So here's the bridge, Trans-Canada, and in Ontario, it's only 2 lanes. So you got to be very careful. And here's this bridge. Now, I always wanted one of these, and I was at Springfield, and the BMLA bridge really fitted. Their brass, but they were gone, and I couldn't even afford them at the time. And there was a guy selling them in a used booth there, and I said, "Ooh," and he says, "Well, I got 2." "Oh, how much do you want for them?"
More is always better.
So I said, you know what? I wanted a big scene. So here's the start of that scene. And I got the bridges sort of sitting in. And a little tip, never, ever do water over foam. You always want to do it over plywood. Anyway. Right. And then you want to look at your rock work. So this is the real rock. This is like 2 minutes away from my home. And here's what I duplicated in plaster. And here's some more plaster work that I was doing to get the rock work right. And that's what it looked like now.
That's pretty much it.
So yeah. And rock, water, trees, baby.
Yeah.
So it really lended itself to the type of scenery I like to do, which is rock work. And of course you've got your RDCs, Mike. That's my passenger service on the line.
Now there's your freelance portion of it, right?
Yes. Yeah. And so they actually will go around the layout, but then they go into Espanola to the little station there, and then they come out and go to the station here. Now I use NCE, and the other thing I like it real finished look. And Tim over at Fast Tracks, I was at the shop and I brought some black walnut and we cut all these pieces. So cool. On the laser, and here's the North Shore Division in areas. So here's Sudbury and the Sioux. These are all the touch toggles. If you're not familiar with them, they hook up to your tortoise. When you touch them, green is straight. When you touch them, and I mean just touch them, they'll turn to red, and that indicates now that you're on the diverging route. These tell me in the hidden track where there's trains in those tracks and which way they're headed. So when I pull a train in, I park it so that the light comes on with the engine, and this one should be out because then you know you're clear of the turnout. And this is about 3 inches away from any turnout. So you got these two heading towards Sudbury. These two are heading towards Sault Ste. Marie. And this track is more of a run around, but I do park the RDCs on them. These vertical ones are for the open yard that you can see. And here's the open yard. And this yard basically is duplicated underneath. So if you, like when people come and say, well, what does the yard look underneath? I said, well, you're looking at it on top, except for there's no industries. It's just the yard. And here's what I did. I built all this before I put the top on, and I built all the turnouts, pre-weighed them out, and I built all the turnouts in here and put all the turnout motors on before I even put them in here, so I didn't have to reach under. And you got the CN North Shore Division.
Is that an RS-18?
Actually, that's a high hood
It's a
GP9, and our good friend Ralph, the Mudfather Runzetti, did that one for me. And then you've got, of course, rail fanning. It seems legit.
That's funny.
And so this is my workbench. It slides in and out. Everybody should have a TV. I built mine right into the fascia and my electric fireplace. So,
hey, Clark.
Yeah.
What do you do? Do you take models and stuff with you down to Arizona in the winter?
Yeah. And being a narrow gauge guy, I have a HUN3 set of modules down there. Mike's got his now, Mike, what kind of hat do you call that?
That's a toque.
That's a toque, right?
And I was following along. There aren't very many of these around. But I was following around. I got this from the train master of the Huron Central. And it shows, like, here's Espanola.
Yeah.
It's the whole book.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
Well, when we did the pre-show, he goes, Clark, you're not going to believe it, but I scouted that. And I went, what? Really? When? But I was in Arizona. So.
Yeah.
And, but so anyway, that's now, Mike, you have seen the railroad. What do you think of the modeling to it?
It's pretty darn close. I mean, like you say, you have to take some liberties with, modeler's license. You know what I mean? I mean, having driven up there and having seen the topography, and I mean that Transcon highway is no joke. There is nowhere to turn around. Yeah. You have to be very selective with where you do certain things. And I was lucky because I had the train master was helping me guide where the train was and who to talk to and where things were. So I didn't have to try to hunt for a whole lot. Everything was kind of there, which was kind of cheating. But I mean, hey, you take what you get, right?
I have a good friend in Sudbury who's a doctor, and he used to know those crews very well until they really clamped down on nobody in the yard.
Yeah.
And but he would he'd give me he'd phone up and go, hey, such and such, you might be wondering, you want to go down and look. And Matt, you were talking about and we were talking about cars, and you were doing it too, Mike, about I kept seeing these slurry cars. And I went, okay, I got to research this. Oh, slurry. Okay, they use it for whitening paper.
Yep.
Yep.
But then I found out once they whiten the paper, they still use it. It goes to Sault Ste. Marie now, and they use it for scrubbing the smokestacks.
Oh, sure.
Hmm.
Yep.
And not anymore, because in the last 2 years they've gone all electric. But they would take that and they would scrub the smokestacks, and then there was like a third thing, and I can't remember what it is. And I thought, wow, that just added to my traffic immensely.
Yeah.
And it was nice that Athearn came out with the slurry cars, so that was good.
Yeah. No, it looks pretty good. I like it.
Thank you. So I don't know if anybody has any questions, and then I guess Mike, you're on.
I am curious about your drop leaf or your drop gate there, because I have
Geezer gate.
The geezer gate, baby.
I have 2 of those on my layout, and I'm finding them to be troublesome. It seems a couple times a year I have to kind of go back and make adjustments to the rail heads and stuff to make sure everything lines up again. How well have you been able to get yours to
the railhead I've never really had a problem with. Mine is swelling.
Yeah, that's what I have too.
Because we have a little bit of humidity, and I've got the humidifier right there at the gate. But a long time ago, I forget who told me this, but I've done it ever since for years, is I lay the track down, like put the gate up and then lay all the track, right?
Right.
And then when it's perfect, I take 5-minute epoxy. And I lay 5-minute epoxy for about 6 inches on either side of that. And I get it on the outside, obviously, and you get it right to the top of the rail. So it's in contact with the rail. And then you let that harden. And then I come back with I don't use a Dremel thing, because I find the spacing too well, especially when I'm doing like the fast tracks, turnouts and that. I use actually it's a dentist one with diamonds in it. And it's only 5 thou.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So when it cuts, it makes you hardly ever hear any clickety clack, because the 5 thou, right?
Yeah.
So I cut that, and then it just swings down and comes back into place. I never have the rails going out of line. And people say, well, what about ballasting? I can tell you, you won't see it once you ballast it.
Sure. Yeah, it seems that my biggest problem has just been the wood swelling. It seems like the rails, I got them soldered down to screws that are screwed into the wood,
yes.
so they stay in place. But the wood around it, and I think even the walls are like between summer and the winter, like the walls are swelling and moving the whole thing around. It's tricky.
It is. We have the same problem here, and like tonight it's pretty cool, so we won't have the air conditioner on, but during the day, of course, we'd put the air conditioner on. But sure. If it's hot enough, and that helps with the humidity, but you're never going to get that all out. You're just not going to get it. So that is a problem every once in a while. Winter is no problem, but sometimes in the
winter you have shrinkage, wouldn't you? Because of the lack of humidity, and it's cold.
Yeah, it gets really dry.
I've seen some guys use metal on their geezer gates.
Yeah.
Just because of that swelling.
Yeah.
That their interface is metal to compensate for that.
Yeah.
But I'm not a metal worker. I don't know how well that would go.
Yeah.
You can use this to that angle.
Tom Hawley said he is a geezer. I know that. So, but I think this year's been probably the worst, and that gate's been up about 5 years, I think now. and still no scenery on it, but we'll get to it.
And you drop down, how wide does it span?
That is 18 inches.
18 inches. Okay.
Yeah, and there's 2 tracks there.
Okay. And I can't remember, did it have scenery on it or?
Not yet.
Not yet.
It will.
Oh, okay. It will. Okay.
Yep.
Because I've seen that too, where they don't do any scenery on it, or
Yeah,
they
no,
do. Or...
I'll put scenery on it. I mean, I'm not going to put a high level of finicky little things, but it'll have static grass or a little bit of water or something or whatever. But.
That's outstanding, Clark.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone out there have any questions for Clark or anything like that? Make sure you guys are getting them into the chat this evening, and for the rest of the panel, for that matter, for Chris and Matt. Any final questions? Make sure that we get them in here. Mike, did you want to do Farland Terminal this evening? A couple people have asked.
Yeah, I can. I got it all set here.
All right.
Oh, by the way, you sound like you're in a tunnle, by the way.
Yeah, I had to disconnect my microphone. It's not working tonight. So.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yep.
And no
I'll
pressure,
just
Mike,
answer.
You're up against that,
Yeah,
I'm just going to answer Ralph's. He wanted to know how long that bridge is, and that bridge is the Geezer Gate is about 30 inches, I guess, maybe 31, because it's the width of the door.
31, wow.
Sounds like the next political scandal, Geezergate.
Right? All right, let's see. Here comes our high quality production value. I got to go. Let's see. What do I do here? I got to go. Do I do this first? No, that's not right. Do this, and then here, and then we go here, and you could stop, and that's it. And there. Can you see all that?
All right. Yep.
All right. Oh, there we go. Hot dog. All right. This is my Farland Terminal Railroad synopsis type thing. So I'm modeling 1992, 93. There's a reason for it. I kept changing from the 80s to the early 90s. And the reason I ended up deciding on the early 90s is because that's really when I started my railroad career. And the railroad, Dakota Rail, really was inspirational for my Farland Terminal Railroad. I really never paid attention to a lot of stuff prior to that. I mean, I did, but I never, I didn't understand. Now I'm starting to get into a point where I understand and I have memories of how things went and what happened. So the town of Farland is completely fictional. It's actually the name of the road that I live on. I live on Farland Avenue, and so I just call it the Farland Terminal. It's a last mile railroad that's about 10 miles long. It has got an inspiration here. You see a Dakota Rail, former Milwaukee Road SW 1200. This was their everyday switch engine that they used, and this was their road power, everything. The whole Dakota Rail was 44 miles long, and I think they had a grand total of 10 customers on the 44 miles, so not a whole lot. I just made the operations. I came up with the date of that's my birthday, and I also have it set up that it's a former Wisconsin and Midwestern branch. Now, the Wisconsin and Midwestern is my very first freelance railroad that I still have. I use it and model it. I'm going to be modeling a little bit of power for it, and some freight cars for it as well. So the Wisconsin and Midwestern will be making a appearance on my Farland Terminal layout. The basic commodities are canned goods, grains, fertilizer, lumber, paper, sand, stone. the gamut of stuff that you typically would see on a short line Wisconsin style layout or a railroad. The neat thing is I've decided I'm only going to have one engine. I've only got one engine for the entire railroad. And in 1979, the Farland Terminal got into the per diem boxcar craze and bought just like a lot of railroads did, bought 100 FMC 5347 boxcars, of which there was only 30 left on the active roster. So the railroad actually only has 30 of those cars left. The other 70 are spread to the four corners of the railroad universe and could be found almost anywhere and probably patched out and all sorts of stuff by this time, you know? So I've done a lot to kind of create a history of my railroad being so small. Here's a really highly detailed map that I was painstakingly a lot of effort to put into this to show where the Farland Terminal kind of sits. So I don't know. Can you see my cursor, Andy? Can you see that?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Okay, this is Green Bay right here. This is where I live. The Green Bay and Western goes east-west from Kewaunee, Wisconsin, out west. In 1992, the Wisconsin Central only came north-south via the Shawano sub up to Argonne Junction, but they came over into Green Bay via the GBW at that point. The Wisconsin Midwestern actually goes diagonal out of Green Bay. The Fox River Valley Railroad had two lines out of Green Bay, one for the Lakeshore sub and one for the Valley sub. This is a former Chicago Northwestern line. The Escanaba and Lake Superior went north out of Green Bay, and the Chicago Northwestern came into or connected with the ELS right outside of Duck Creek, Wisconsin, and that went north. And so this is kind of the way things looked in 1992. So the 10-mile Farland Terminal is off the Wisconsin and Midwestern right there. It's away from everything else. So I don't have a lot of connections with any of the other railroads, but yet I do have direct access to all the railroads in Green Bay via the Wisconsin Midwestern. So it might not be outside the realm of possibility that a Chicago and Northwestern or an FRV or GP9 might need to be used on the Farland Terminal when my switch engine needs to go in to be serviced. Because I talked about the outside looking in or the inside looking out. One of that aspects is the power every 92 days has to be inspected. And when that happens, it has to go to a shop facility. Well, my railroad doesn't have a shop facility. So it goes to the Wisconsin Midwestern facility in Green Bay. And in return, because I still have to have day-to-day operations, I get an engine from somebody that I'm leasing an engine from. You never know what it's going to be.
Yeah.
This is a little bit more a little bit more detailed map explaining where my stuff is. Farland Junction is the interchange with the Wisconsin Midwestern. Then you get to the town of Noedia, and yep, that is exactly the way it looks. I am taking great liberties with the pronunciation of that, and I don't care what people think. I think it's hilarious because that's the first thing I ask myself is I'm like, okay, what am I going to call the town where this gravel and sand transload facility is? And I'm like, I got no idea. Oh, no idea. Make it one word, no idea. So that's the way it's going to be.
It's an Indian
then
name.
it is an Indian name. You know, it means help. There's a pig in my kitchen. Uh,
And the pronunciation is very Wisconsin.
It is, right? So I'm trying to stay true to form here a little bit. Right here, I named, I'm going to have a bridge scene and everything with a little creek / river underneath it. I just named it after my wife, just because, I mean, she's been very supportive and I just kind of wanted to do something nice. So I, thought I'd name the river after her. And then in the town of Farland, these are what we're going to have. We got a general purpose warehouse, fertilizer plant, co-op, and then there's going to be the engine facility is going to be in there. Operations, you're going to have one job per session. You could run multiple sessions in a night. You're going to go from the town of Farland. Okay, you're going to go from here. You're going to do the work in Farland, take the train all the way to Noidia, switch out the gravel and sand facility if needed, then take that to Farland Junction. I can't believe I just noticed I misspelled my own town name.
Yeah, Falren.
Fallerin. What idiot did that? Jeez, whatever. So then once you get to Farland Junction, you get done swapping your train out for what the Wisconsin Midwestern is left. You'd make a beeline directly back to Farland. And then what you do is you'll cut the train off on the side or on the main line, put the power away, and that's your day. The next session comes around, you take the power out and you start the whole process all over again. It's very similar to the way things were done on Dakota Rail. Yeah, very, very similar. In Dakota Rail, they would come out of the engine house, they would switch 3M, and they would take off and head 3M in Hutchinson, Minnesota, and then they would head out to the east towards Watseka, or was it Wayzata? Wayzata. Yeah, there you go. I can never remember. There we go. You'd head out to the east that way, and you might do one or two small little locations. But on the way back, you either you stopped at Silver. There was an engine house at Silver Lake, I think the name of the town was, and then one at Hutchinson. And you could stop in either one of those spots if you had, So, but I'm not going to that part because my railroad's only 10 miles long. But this pretty much explains that exact scene, that thing. Here's some inspirations for the industries. This industry on the top is called Bay 1. It's a concrete warehouse. And the bottom, this is called Bay 3. At one point, these were owned by the same place. There were a lot of paper storage, things like that. I used to switch both of them. And what I did was, as I kind of combined the two. So this is going to be the warehouse. I did this using a lot of Boomer's techniques. And as you can see, this is just a single track that goes right back. It holds 2 cars. It doesn't get much simpler than that. This is a fertilizer plant in Brandon, Wisconsin, right down the road from where Andy lives. And I really just like the way this is all laid out. So this whole facility is kind of, I'm freelancing the facility, but it's going to be loosely based off of this. So you can see they use augers, and the augers just go and dump the stuff right into the building. There isn't the fancy set of stuff up here on the top that guides things from one place to another. That's all internal here. So I'm going to model that. And because I like these augers. And I think they make a really neat detail on a layout. Like I say, simple is sometimes the easiest way to go. And this is kind of a real generic rendition of this. So this is actually going to get extended to this from this point to the right, from right here to it's basically right to the right of this is going to get extended another 19 inches. So this will be down a little bit, but it will only hold one car when I get done with it. My trains will only be 4 cars long at the max, because that's all the more I can hold on my sidings. Then that same track, this is the feed portion of it, or the grain elevator portion of it. And that's going to be very, very similar. You can see they have the loadout here, big giant grain bins, single track. And mine's going to be a little bit more extravagant than that. I may hold 2 cars here. I haven't decided on that. It's going to hold 1 or 2 cars. I did just buy in St. Louis a brand new elevator leg. So this elevator leg will actually potentially become part of the fertilizer plant, but I haven't decided on that yet. I'm still kind of putzing around with stuff. The engine facility, this is some place that I've always wanted to take pictures of, and the only reason I never did is because I was working, and it was treacherous. I should have taken a picture of the entire hill. I want to say this is a 3.2% grade coming down this.
Is that Niagara?
This is in Niagara. Yeah,
it's almost 4.
Yeah, it's almost a 4% grade coming down. It's very short. The grade is only maybe about 15 cars long, maybe 20 at the most, but you are almost going straight down. And at the very end of this, the Chicago Northwestern had this little engine facility here. And obviously there's things that aren't here, but this is what's left of it. And so I'm going to model my engine facility kind of loosely off of what the one in Niagara was. And it's just a couple of little, phone box with a pole with phone box on it, a shed, and then that's like a chemical locker type of deal. And this is going to be, that's just going to go right here on that track, and I'll figure out where I'm going to put what later when it gets time to figuring that part out. I just needed the reference photos in order to sort that part out. This track right here, I forgot to show it. This track right here is the single track that goes back to the co-op and the feed mill. So in order to make the switch on the box cars, you can do that right here. But if there's a car here at spot 2, you're not going to be able to. You got to go all the way back to the other end of the siding, and we used to have to do garbage like that all the time on the railroad. So it is very prototypical. The bridge is going to be, I just went and took some new pictures of a bridge that I'm with my drone today. That is much better than the one that I show right here, but it gives the same general idea. It's just going to be wood bents and a wood deck bridge. That's all it's going to be to go over the Joy River. This is the span that I have. I do already have these lines are every 14 feet, which is about what the bent distance between the bents is supposed to be. Then my gravel loadout is right here. This is the way I'm going to do my gravel loadout. It's just, and I just bought myself a Caterpillar loader for this. And it's, even though it's 1/50th scale, it really does not look out of place. So it's going to be really kind of a neat little operation. Sand is going to be also loaded, and it's going to be very similar to the way it's being shown done right here. It's 2 bay covered hoppers here on the right, and I believe this is just grain loading right here, obviously. But that's the way my Evahay stone and sand is going to be. This is the way that looks. So I'll have some an elevated area here for the loader to be on, so it can dump into the hoppers. And then you'll have 1 car or 1 or 2 or however many you end up with here, and you end up having to switch this. Now, if you notice, there's ties back here, because at one point this did go back that way. I actually cut it off because the way this goes in towards the bridge, I thought, boy, this kind of looks like it used to be a siding. So that's the way that's going to be modeled. That an old switch with a with the end of the siding, but doesn't get serviced but by the one direction anymore. And so that's going to be that. And then every railroad has an end. I don't care where you are. Every single railroad, whether you're a class 1, whether you're a short line, whether you're a last mile railroad, you have a physical end of track someplace. And like in Manitowoc, where I work, we can only go so far in either direction. The track physically ends at those locations. You go down to the lakeshore, the track physically ends right there. So I created my interchange so that way on this switch right here, I can get one engine. I can get a GP38-2 past this, or in a GP35. So I can get a bigger engine on the layout if I need to. But I created myself I just made a little red board right there. So that's and a dirt pile. That's because I've seen pictures like this and of the end of railroads, and that's what it was. It was a dirt pile with a red board at the end. Yep. There's no, and there is no extending the railroad through the wall. I was asked that several times, and I don't want that. I wanted a end of the line interchange, and this is the 2 tracks that are just basically the main line and a runaround. One of these will hold about 4 cars. And then this interchange track right here that goes into the Wisconsin Midwestern, which this is a dummy track. It's just kind of glued in place. This is, it doesn't even have power to it. This is, this track right here will hold 4 cars. Yeah. My power, there's my switch engine. I got it from the Norfolk Southern at one point. It was an old Norfolk Western unit. They numbered it 800. You can see the influence of the Dakota Rail where I just patched out the one spot. And I came up with ghost lettering. I created my own ghost lettering. It's not really that good, but it's noticeable.
That's nice.
But then this is actually an old scale guy that a friend of mine, Chris Holschbach, gave me. And so I kind of set the scene, looking like that's supposed to be me, even though I'm not blonde. I'm looking at the engine going, well, what are we going to do with this thing? And I came up with a new paint scheme to kind of bring it into the 90s a little bit. And this is my railroad's, my sole locomotive's paint scheme. This is my,
it's got a beacon.
It does have a beacon, yes, and no ditch lights.
No ditch lights.
Yeah, it's got a beacon and no ditch lights. And then this is the rough. Well, I shouldn't say rough. This is the for the Farland Terminals per diem era boxcars. I was gonna put my logo on a plate, but then I realized after going to work a couple of times, believe it or not, this is where my job actually came into play with my modeling. I was looking at the way the boxcar doors slid, and I'm like, okay, there's no way that a plate would have fit right there. I'm going to have to do something else. And so I decided to just forego the plate, and the logo is just quote unquote painted onto the car. Mm-hmm. So it's stenciled onto the car. And the first 50 cars, 9400 to 9449, have a green door with a herald. Then they ordered another 50 cars after that. And because they were in a time crunch to get the cars, they said the heck with it. And those cars just have reporting marks on it. They just said a tan door and no herald on the second set. So I'm going to have a mashup of both of those kind of sets of cars on my layout at one point. And then I've got my Facebook group, Farland Terminal Facebook group, and I post all sorts of garbage on there, layout stuff, rail fanning stuff, all sorts of things. So, and that's my Farland Terminal. If anybody's got any questions, shoot.
All right.
Mike, yours is in the basement, correct?
Yeah. Mine's in the basement. Yep. Yeah. Oh, and my whole layout's 11.5 inches wide. In S scale, by the way.
Which I heard your background on how you got into S scale. rabbit hole.
Well, yeah, and the thing is it was just one of those deals where I don't think I had a choice. Things weren't going good for a little while there, and now I'm at the point where it's just is what it is. I love it. You know.
Excellent. Who wants to give away a car?
Yay!
Yay! I'll do it.
You guys want to do it? All right, let's get the section crew. If you guys have questions out there, make sure that you guys are asking them to the panel here before we give away this car. So tonight we're going to be giving away a Home Shops hashtag not sponsored Pullman Standard 4750 covered hopper, decorated up in Michigan Interstate. And to enter into the drawing this evening, what you guys need to put out there is hashtag freelance. So let me see here. I can pull up the banner for this evening. Hashtag freelance. Put that in the chat. We're going to start collecting comments here. I'll bring that up on screen. And Heath, as far as hours 4 through 6, you better stick around because there will be a test afterwards. So, good. So we'll do hashtag freelance. I'll put that up on the screen. Let's get some entries in here for the HO scale home shops.
No, I have not given up on. No, I did not give up on Sargents. That's what I'm using. I have cars with KD couplers on it. I'm just using as placeholders for what I'm going to do with stuff. The cars we saw with KDs have not been converted over to Sargents yet, and I'm using inventive models right now. I'm using a lot more inventive models couplers. So no, Sargent couplers are the standard on the Farland terminal.
Yeah. Good question. So Humanity Junction says capital F, lowercase f. Does it matter? It does. I have the on the screen here. Hashtag freelance. All lowercase. Make sure you're putting in lowercase, no capitals. There we go. So right now we are up to 31 entries on here. Everyone there. Chris put one in there.
I was going to say participants able to do that or not?
Yeah, it's all random. Go for it if you want to.
Yeah, in scaler winning HO swag.
Yeah, sorry for the N scalers out there, but yeah, throw your name in. The only people that can't win it, it's either me and Mike.
Oh, come on.
Sorry, Mike.
And I'm right in the middle of putting in for. I just wanted to see if I never win nothing.
Yeah, you never win anything. And I do apologize this evening for the audio issues. I don't know how we bungled that up on my end, but
what's that?
My audio this evening sounds like
Mike, you like how he said we?
I do.
It's me and the mouse in my pocket.
How do we get a boxcar for a Farland terminal boxcar for our layout? Well, stay tuned.
Ooh. So tell us again.
Yeah, they're all S scale though.
Yeah.
Hey, that's okay.
No, actually,
I'm okay with S scale.
Yeah.
Actually,
Clark, you're okay with it.
A little later, one of these shows in the upcoming future, there will be a reveal of some sort, maybe, possibly.
Uh-oh.
So what do you get your scales? Decals, decals.
Decals, that's the Canadian version. That a boy.
That's Aussie,
Who did my decals?
Yeah.
Who did do my decals? I want to say Circus City did them.
I was thinking, yeah. Okay.
All right. Reminder here, if you guys want to win the Tangent boxcar, put in hashtag freelance as you see it on the screen here. We're up to, looks like, 35 entries here. So get them in here. Get them in.
And just a bit of a plug for home shops. I gotta say, I am thrilled that there's somebody out there doing this for the freelance community. I've got a Seaboard Central car now and a Washington Northern car, which Washington Northern, I got the magazine open right here. It's one of the layouts that really inspired me to sort of continue down this road of freelance, because and then to have a car of that quality with the printing on it of that quality and have it sit right alongside the prototype cars on my layout and look just as good is really fantastic.
Yeah, it's good. It's a fantastic company. I have a lot of the covered hoppers. I got all the box cars. You can see them behind me lined up here. So real happy with Home Shop. So I think, let's check in again here on the giveaway tool. We got 36 entries. I think it's time to make a drawing here, and we'll get everyone out of here. So there you go. Yeah, Chris has got one as well. He's got a Gulf Ship Island. That looks really good.
I got V&O as well.
Oh, do you?
Yep.
All right. So we're going to share this. Everyone should be able to see this on screen here for #freelance. I'm going to go through and do the drawing right now. Here we go. Hang on to your butts.
I don't want to win a butt.
Winner, Paul Bellamore is the winner of the Home Shops Michigan Interstate 4750 covered hopper. Congratulations, Paul. Paul, I believe, was a guest on the show at one point. Fantastic weathering clinic that he put on for us. So well done, Paul. Do want to thank everyone. Let's see here, Paul. Send me a DM afterwards with your address on where I can mail that car out to, and I'll get that out in the post right away. So I guess before we adjourn for the evening here, I do want to just go around the horn here and get last comments, thoughts about freelance from our panel here. We'll start with Chris in the top right. Chris, on your freelance journey, what do you think of doing this as opposed to prototype railroading and model railroading, and which one's harder? Which one do you think would be harder to do?
I think freelance is harder because you have to use your own creativity, but you can use as many resources as you want. I mean, you can get as close to prototype, or you can just do like a Gore and Defeated and just be whimsical, or however you want. There's there's a wide range you can do, but it's a lot of it's your own creativity. Using history, revisionist history, how you come up with your logo, and like there's different styles of people who are more literary or more like mechanical, and I think me being more mechanical, it's another way of me being more creative.
Yeah, that's awesome. What about Matt? What do you think? Prototype or freelance? Which is harder? And what are your thoughts on it?
I think it really depends on how realistic you're wanting or maybe even believable is a better word. You're wanting your layout to be. I think the closer you get to the goal of realism, the more difficult freelance becomes, because so much more of that gets put on your shoulders to bring that realism to the layout, to the to what you're looking to model there. I think what's really fantastic about everyone around this table here is we've all taken inspiration from a prototype into our freelance world. And I know sometimes, the prototype modelers will take a look at us freelance guys and be like, you're just doing your railroad of lies. But I hopefully tonight we've kind of shown that there's quite a bit of thought that goes into this kind of thing, and there's quite a bit of, even though we're doing freelance stuff, you prototype guys, we're still learning from you. We're still looking at what you're doing and bringing it into our world as well. So yeah, for me, freelance is the way to go. I think it adds just that extra layer to the hobby on top of everything else to make it fun and interesting, and even that much more creative. And yeah, so
yeah, awesome. What about you, Chris? Chris Bell, any feelings on the prototype versus freelance and in your journey?
Right. So I almost did the prototype route with that Des Moines Union, and found out, yeah, so it's hard. Ray Arnott said, oh, you just slap a name on it and you call it a freelance railroad, and it's more difficult than that. I mean, there's more to it, more thought to it. So you have, and then prototype, you have that brand loyalty that you have to consider. So there's difficulty to both sides, but I think freelance is harder because you have to, you can pick and choose. You can be, I can have a UP, but I want BN style equipment on it instead.
Sure.
Or, I want to have a UP, but I want it to run out east. That's a harder sell. And sure. I think it's harder to pick out that. And he said it best, is it prototype layout versus prototype operations, which adds another layer to your whole freelancing things. And so I think freelance is harder because I'm like Mike. After listening to your Around the Layout podcast, I am you're my spirit animal.
Oh
yeah.
I love
the pressure. The pressure I have now.
What happens? Yeah. Oh man, what happens during freelance week stays in the second section. That's for sure.
Yeah.
We're calling out spirit animals.
I'm somebody's spirit animal?
Oh yeah.
Holy cow.
I mean, you saw all the crazy logos I came up with. And
yeah.
The rocks there, And that isn't even the half of it. I mean, timetables, switch lists, warrant cards. I've done it all. And at one point, and that's the hard thing too, is knowing what a real railroad does. Because when I started out, Model Railroader had this thing. Everybody had those Union switch and signal boards.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I got to have one of those. And then I'm like, well, how does that fit on a small railroad? It only goes 4 miles. That's, the Des Moines Union was only 4 miles long. Do I need a Union switch and signal board? I'd like to have one, but yeah. So, yeah, I think freelance is actually harder than what those prototype guys would have you believe. And I'll leave it there.
Fighting words right there.
Shots fired. We'll have to get the
shot across the bow.
Guys on for a rebuttal. And then Clark, we'll pass the microphone over to you.
No.
Moving on. Perfect.
You guys have answered, I think, as much. I think it's just going to be up to the individual modeler.
Yeah.
Really where their interest is, and to tell somebody, this is harder, that I don't know. Again, I strapped the 2x4 on my rear end and don't fall into those holes. But yeah, it's been a fun evening, you guys, and I appreciate you having me on. There was a couple people asked a question, and I was just kind of going back about am I still doing the NMRA thing? Yeah, I still do the teaching on the hands-on clinics. And there was another, how do I clean the
staging tracks?
The staging tracks.
Underneath.
Well,
yep.
Yeah, when I design this, can I go to presentation? When I design this staging thing, I designed it, and again, you have to think about all this. And so this is the bottom section of the layout.
There you go.
And you'll see these areas, and all along the back, that's all open. Now, when you look into the layout, this has actually got a floor in it that's painted green. That's why you'll see when you look into it, it looks so deep that it looks dark. But I can actually just lift those out, and then I can get into any of the layout all the way around.
Oh, nice.
And I built so many layouts, and I've built for other people, and I've been in that. I know the pitfalls, and I just try and stay away from the pitfalls. Now, not every pitfall you think of, but like one of the things, again, we were talking about, Matt, about the geyser gate and the swelling. I use only cabinet grade plywood, and this is on the bottom. It was 1 inch, and it's pretty expensive, but I didn't have any problems. I don't have any problems with movement of the track. And I just use cork. I use cork flooring, and then I paint it all gray. And when you seal it up with the paint, it really helps with the moisture content. But I think I've got another picture where you can. It's just painting, and I've got re-railers under all of those. Like every 5 feet, I changed out the rail. So here's that's all that staging. So you can get in from the front or from the back. And this is only about 16 inches. So, and then all this is open to me at the front. Let me see if I can find it here. Paint people.
So do you, Andy
Yeah,
and
here.
Mike, sorry.
So, yeah, so here's sort of with the top on, but see how it's all open here? And then I put in masonite fillers in there with and I painted all this greens the same as the fascia. So when you look into it, you don't really see it. I hope that helps people.
Yeah, that is helpful. Yeah, very good. There's another lightning round question here. What's the height of your layout?
It is 52 inches.
There you go.
I like to operate standing up, and somebody asked me. It looks like I'm more of a train watcher, but actually I run sessions. I have a JMRI, and it's all ready to go. And I have in our area we have a model railroad club. Now there's about 6 guys that are kind of interested in operations. They're not used to it, but they come over and they operate, and they're getting much better at it. And I just use JMRI, and it seems to work. So, yeah. But for a while there, we were doing it once a month. And then I kind of stopped it because I was trying to get more scenery done. So,
yeah, sure. So, Mike, let's do the awkward, what does Mike think? Question here. So pretty interesting roundtable discussion this evening about freelance, I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it went kind of the way I thought it would, to be honest with you. I mean, there's a lot of, your technical difficulties.
Oh, geez.
And my, having to take the reins and not even knowing what's going on. And I mean, it was pretty much, it was par for the course. I mean, it was all right. Yeah. But no, these guys have all 4 of these guys have brought up, and a ton of guys in the section crew have brought up really, really good points. And the thing is, Ralph Renzetti made a point earlier, far back in the comments, where it's your layout. You can do whatever you want with it.
That's true.
And that is kind of the there is no playbook for this. So you can take whatever you want out of your inspirations, or if you want your layout to be a crappy little 10-mile railroad, or if you want it to be a 10,000-mile railroad, even though you're only going to model a small portion of it, the bigger story tells a lot about what that small little section is going to be about, right? So you can put as much effort into this as you do a prototype. I actually think they are literally parallel. I really honestly do, because you can go down the prototype road and start getting into all these different things and aspects of stuff that you never thought would have happened in order to get into your layout. The only difference is with freelancing, you've got to create that yourself.
Sure.
And that's it. The real world does that for you with prototyping. Freelancing, it takes a little bit of ingenuity and a little creativity to be able to come up with something that kind of makes sense. But if it makes sense to you, that's good enough. That's all that matters. Remember, you're building your layout for yourself, not for anybody else, first and foremost. And once you make yourself happy, then you can worry about whether or not other people are happy. So
it's good. I think that's a real good thought to leave on. Prototype, freelance, it's all good.
It's all good.
It's all good. And
Yep.
at the end of the day, it's all about, it's your hobby and satisfying, your needs with it. So well said. I do have a couple administrative notes here before we tie out for tonight. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another live stream. We're going to have a fellow YouTuber on, is Railfan220. His name's Cam. He's going through a bit of, let's say, a change on his layout. He's modeling modern day Burlington Northern, and he's completely upending his operations, and he's agreed to come on the show to talk about it. So it's going to be really cool. So we'll go right into prototype modeling right out of the freelance. Reminder, everyone, it's freelance week at the second section. So out on the Facebook group, second section podcast, make sure you guys, if you want to participate in freelance week, come on out there. There's a bunch of people posting about the railroads, sharing how they come up with, sharing their backstories, which I think is a big part of freelancing. And it's been a really fun ride. And I'm posting a few of our favorites over here as well, giving those folks exposure as well. So make sure you join the fun over at the second section podcast Facebook group. And then the last bit of business that we do have to talk about this evening is, let's see. I just want to thank everyone for sticking with us through the technical difficulties. Mikey did a fantastic job filling in for my loud mouth. And Chris, Matt, and Clark, I know it's been a marathon slog. Thank you for putting all the work in for the presentations, fielding the questions, and participating. It was really it was fun. And even though I wasn't in the stream, I could still hear what was going on. So I thought you guys did fantastic. So for me, the crew here, I want to thank the section crew, and we'll see you all in 2 weeks. Good night, everyone.
Thank you. I had a great time.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Here we go.